Thank you for choosing to listen to this, our first episode of Scripture Study Club, co-hosted by Howard, John, Patrick, and Michael. There are some audio issues due to Michael's Skype feed due to a storm in his area, but I've cleaned this up as best I could. As we discuss a chapter, a reading of it from the King James Bible will be inserted. Each of us will have our preferred English translation of the Bible and sometimes comment on the variations in wording during the show. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly over the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, "Let earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and every thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to every thing that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day.
I have my notes here with me. Don't know if I can get to read them though, for the whole study thing. I heard you mentioned earlier, like, that was a confusing kind of book, like our chapters that you read 1 to 3.
I wouldn't use the word confusing, just convoluted, maybe.
Intentionally so, like it sounded that way, like, because it was coded language, that sort of way. And
maybe not intentionally. Like you know, when you encode ideas into language, you're not making it intentionally obscure. It just is. And when you translate from one language to another, or maybe two languages, then things get weird.
But the narrative has existed in Hebrew for a long time. It's not that word for word translation ends up in a bad sort of narrative. But do you not think, like, biblical scholars and translators already understood the story and then made a replica in their native tongues? That's what it seems like happened to me. I mean, if you look at the Vulgate, that's the older Catholic one, and compare it to kind of like the revised editions that we have today, like whether the international or American, they're pretty similar. I mean, what I mean is, like, they might use different words, but the narrative is still as solid as it was in, like, the 4th and 5th centuries. That's how I would view the Bible in general. Like, if you want to look at words only, interpretation is a different matter. It's kind of changed over the centuries.
As it does, with culture.
Well, even changed in Ireland, I suppose, like from the 4th century onwards. I don't know if you heard of a man, Augustinius Ibernicus. You know him? It's like the earliest Irish theologian of Christianity, like kind of like the Saint Augustine of Ireland, and he's also named after him. But he took the Bible like 100% literally, and he was what you would call a Celtic Christian, who we're told today never take anything literally, and it's just spiritual fluff. So the early Irish Christians were taking it more literal than the Continentals, like all the Old Testament, New Testament, all of it. It changed over time, but that's only because they copied the Continentals. It's not because it's specifically an Irish trait of Christianity is that it's super literal. And they actually went to great lengths to try and explain how it could be literal. And they were very, very interesting explanations, actually. Should get into them another time. None of them relate to Genesis, really, or the start of Genesis. Except for the super celestial waters. I suppose you could get into it, that surround the earth itself, as per like the cosmological chart I gave you, like of the worlds. The early Irish monks and theologians, they hypothesized that was actually frozen in space, as in a sheet of ice, which possibly contained the stars to some extent or other. So that's how they envisage like how water could actually surround the Earth, and that like space was obviously sub-zero at the very least.
That makes sense.
It makes sense if you're looking at a literal translation of the Bible, and they're right to a certain extent if you factor in comets, which are massive ice and gas particles. It depends what kind of comet it is, but a lot of it can have ice on it. So, they didn't anticipate that exact science, but they were ballparking it pretty well for like the 4th and 5th centuries, I think. So where do you want to start at? Genesis 1?
Well, I was wondering, do we do this verse by verse or chapter by chapter?
I was thinking chapter by chapter, starting at 1, but we'll work on it like more around ideas and point to the verse where we may think that applies. Like the first thing I would say about it is like Genesis 1 is different from 2 and 3 because chapters, I mean, because like it was inserted by the priests about 800 years later. Because Genesis chapter 2 is actually probably the first chapter originally. And the priests, in order to preserve Hebrew culture, at the time when they were in exile and in bondage, they actually inserted a new chapter 1, so to speak, if there were any chapters. But they inserted a new beginning. And it was all to do with preserving their identity and upholding the Sabbaths and creating like a precedent for their culture of the day in like 500 BC.
Right.
And to preserve the festivals. That's why God is like resting at the end of the days of creation, because it's kind of emulating and preempting what they're doing in those days and still do today.
So
like
basically,
the second
Genesis 1, it's called solely deals with how God actually created the earth, while Genesis 2 more deals with man being placed.
There are actually two accounts of creation. There's one in chapter 1, and then there's the other one in 2 and 3. There's actually two different accounts that are entirely not the same. And this has to do with, it's called the P tract, or the priestly tract, chapter 1. And the priest actually inserted, there's a number of chapters throughout Genesis that they actually just put in 500 to 800 years later to kind of explain like what this mythology meant, like in their modern day religion, or what was the modern day religion.
Right.
So like chapter 1 is more to do with like they're trying to quote unquote scientifically explain like how like the elements are put together to create the earth, and the understanding they would have had from like the Near Easterners and the classics. Like for example, like even just verses 1 to 4, you see that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. We all know that one. But the earth was without shape, and darkness over the abyss. The abyss in Near Eastern religions of Mesopotamia refer to like earth that is dark. Like the material already exists. It's just a formless from like the Near Easterners and the classics. Like for example, like even just verses 1 to 4, you see that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. We all know that one. But the earth was without shape, and darkness over the abyss. The abyss in Near Eastern religions of Mesopotamia refer to like earth that is dark. Like the material already exists. It's just a formless earthen mass. It can't yet be logically understood yet, or intelligible. It is nothing intelligible you can add to it. But all you can say that some mass already existed, and then it has a mighty winds swept over the waters. So the mighty winds is God's breath, and that stands for air over the waters, and that's the super celestial water, which is referring to the element of water. But like none of this still makes any sense. This is just the very beginning, and God is, if you want to say, taking on a vaporous form and rolling over the mass itself, like in the Gununga Gap of the Near East. You know, Gununga Gap in Norse mythology. It's elemental chaos that cannot yet be understood. So this is like the Gununga Gap of, except Near Eastern style, probably of Sumerians, Babylonians, and now the Hebrews are taking it up to explain. Their priests are trying to explain through the religions of their day. The guys who they're overlords, they're trying to using their religion to explain how the Hebrews are actually have the right on a monotheistic God above their gods, their enemies' gods. And so, in verse 3. It renders all this intelligible because God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's fire. And God saw that the light was good. So everything is becoming intelligible. The elements are being ordered. You know, and this, if you see later on in, I think it's verse 26, that God is actually allowing man, when he creates him, to also create the light of intelligibility on the world. Because he says, and then God says, this is verse 26, "Let us make human beings in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the tame animals, all the wild animals, and all the creatures that crawl on the earth." Then God created mankind in his image. In the image God. He created them, male and female. He created them. So therefore, he's creating man from the earth, because Adam means from the ground or from the earth. So he's from the earth element. But he's imbuing Adam with all the traits necessary, the godly traits, the image of God, in order to render everything intelligible, to understand the world around him.
Can I stop you here, right? Because you're opening multiple cans of worms here.
I'm just, that's what I mean. I like to explain by idea rather than verse by verse, but yeah. Well,
But one thing that I think is essential to get out of the way first, right, is that either me or Patrick, it couldn't be you because you're on your phone. Either me or Patrick, we read verse 1. Chapter 1.
I could read verse 1. Or
I'm just skimming it through on my phone at the same time while talking. But like, is there anything you need to like add to that? How did you see like the initial first few lines of creation?
I'd like to add something to that. I mean, I thought you laid some good groundwork there. Let's see. Okay, what I noticed is that after each aspect of creation, God said it was good, and so and so if you look at some of the modern perceptions of the world, we're sort of fed this idea that like the world and creation is like inherently bad, and this is almost a way to spiritually demoralize us. And so I would say that this idea that the world is bad, that's like almost like a satanic idea, and its aim seems to me would be to reduce the world to its pre-creation state. Maybe not in terms of the way things look on the outside, but in terms of people's souls. So the pre-creation state, I think, was like formless chaos, So I think that the essential, by trying to plant the seed in the world of creation is essentially bad. You're trying to bring people's souls into like formless chaos and social order.
So kind of like reversing back into where we originally came from, disordered kind of state, nothingness.
Yeah.
Like the 101 different genders that people can have now. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right. It's dissolving people's souls. What's going on?
That would be called the abyss, according to what we just read. Like, that's where we are. That's where we want to stay, so to speak. There's like I describe it like as well. If you continue on a little bit, like days, each day that goes by, like in the first day, he creates the night and day, light and darkness. At the very beginning, like it's like in the ancient Irish or the Gaelic calendar, that the day begins at night time, like in the evening, and then progresses to light. So, and the first day he's setting the stage that like man begins in darkness but goes towards the light, so that man can eventually be able to like rise up to God and create his own light, but through God's gifts, not by himself. So it's kind of like the way I describe it's kind of like a pentagram of the elements, because like on the second day he creates from the water, the elements, and then he creates the air after that, or the fire, and then the air, and then he creates the land animals and the sea animals. And then on the sixth day he creates man. So it's kind of all leading up to all of this, and on the seventh day he rests and sees that it was very good what he has created.
Well, I like what you say, Owen, about the light was created after the darkness, because that like also like indicates that like redemption happens after the fall. after like sort of like a state of like defilement. If light can be created after darkness, people can receive grace after being in a state of like spiritual pollution.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea of forgiveness, but it's also, I think, imposing not just those values, but like a hierarchy of values as well. That's what's happening in each day. And the top of the hierarchy, there's man, and at the bottom of the hierarchy, there's the base elements: three, earth, water, air. Then you have fire, which man is now able to wield, or just light. And God represents the head of all this. He's the aether or ether. And another aspect I'd like to say is that, like, words, when God created the world, the universe, he created through his breath, through the word. And so it's like the physics of the world are based on words, the actual elements itself. And so that fits into this hierarchy. And like, I think what you're saying about forgiveness, I think if you look close at it, you'll see a hierarchy of values, as in moral values in there as well to some extent, but more so probably in chapter 2 where that comes in. This is kind of like a physical explanation, and the next one, chapter 2 and 3, are moral.
Yeah, like the whole idea of like creation in words, that relates to Plato's world of ideas. Plato said that everything that exists is like a reflection of a pure eternal form that he called an idea. And so this actually coincides with creation happening through words. And I mean, like, I think this is why we have to be careful with negative self-talk, because that can amount to people cursing themselves, basically, if they say things negative about themselves. But I also like about, the idea that humans were created sort of last. That Owen talked about. That's like humans having dominion. Yeah. To almost be guardians, I would say, of creation. I would say that gives mankind a status of guardians of creation.
I would go a bit further even and say they're regents of God on the earth. That's the way God describes in chapter 2 later on. Like, we are reigning as sovereigns through him, for him on earth. And we're like,
right. Now, can I take this opportunity, to nail this down, right? When God said that he gave Adam, there's a variety of different words in different English translations. Dominion, right? Dominion is more like sovereignty, I guess. While, you have other translations that say to subdue, to control, to rule over, in reference to the other animals in God's kingdom. So what's right? Do we have dominion, or do we have, like, dominance?
Actually, I've been reading, like the brothers Karamazov recently, and like the kind of hero of the story is this novice monk, and kind of like at the pinnacle of like his like religious life or something like that, or like during a massive like change in it, I guess, like the death of his elder. He kind of has this like religious experience, where he kind of feels like he's responsible for kind of like the whole world, I guess, that kind of ties into what you guys were just talking about there. It's going to help me understand it, I think, a bit more.
What's the name of the monk?
One of his other brothers who's kind of like having a completely opposite experience. So I don't know, but just kind of by what I imagine, like I kind of think it would be more in line than that, like
Mike,
dominion, I guess.
Mike, I just have to say, it sounds like you're coming over a CB radio.
Yeah, it's probably pretty bad. There's like a kind of storm where I am at the moment.
It's a little bit better now. What was the name of the monk you were saying?
It's the brothers Karamazov.
Oh, okay.
Did you guys catch any of that? Or?
Yeah,
yes.
I did.
Yeah, got it. But what was I going to say? I just wanted to kind of say something when Patrick was talking about Plato and the realm of forms and pure fact, and relating it possibly to the words or the word in Genesis 1. I think that goes into the actual name of the book, Genesis. That's not actually the original name for the Hebrew book. I don't know what the actual name was or if it had one. But Genesis actually refers to the Greek, and it means generation, like the generation of the heavens and the earth. And like it's different from the Hebrew word, which is Bereshit, which means in the beginning or the beginning. Because they're two kind of different worldviews of looking at creation, because the Greek assumes, like Plato would, that the realm of forms is pre-existent, that is the one, or God is pre-existent to everything else. So there's sort of like a prehistory even to Genesis, to the Greeks, to the Greek thinkers, in that like it's the generation of the heaven and the earth, but it also came from something else before it, and it's leading on to something else. It's kind of like a stop on the way, whereas so it's God-centered, whereas the Hebrew is more focused on man, beginning. That is when man comes, when Adam comes from God himself through the word. So that would be a difference between the two lines of thought. And what we even heard is, as it's called, Genesis, is more so the of like body and soul, because the Hebrews didn't believe in body and soul. That was the Greeks. There's no body and soul the whole of Genesis or the Old Testament for that matter. It's God breathing life into Adam through his nostrils, like from the one breath, so that he can become God or can live with God or go to his abode, be worthy of the Garden of Eden, paradise. I just wanted to write that in, like with Plato, because there's two forms of understanding of Christianity or the Old Testament in general. There's the Christian and Greek, and the Jewish. What was I going to say? What's interesting to me, just to wrap up the whole elemental, is that like Adam, which means from the ground, he's created from the first element, the most base element, that is from the abyss itself. But he's actually given first status to be able to control everything and to lead his own life and to raise himself up towards God. That's what I would take from Genesis 1.
I'd say so. He also, like, if you want to know specifically what the image of God is, that would be the ability to speak words, because that's the only thing.
To create light.
Yeah.
The words create the light, the ruling force in the world, in the universe.
Yeah, and I think that's specifically what gives humans dominion, is the words.
Would it be like Ogma, Irish mythology, where the runes of power are actually constructs of archetypes and typologies, as in like they can open the proverbial stairway to heaven or the other world, and open doorways to other areas.
I didn't know that.
I mean, in Irish mythology, I can't tell the particular story, but I'd rather speak about this in chapter 2 because it's kind of more applicable for that. Behind each rune was supposedly a form of secret wisdom. What that wisdom was, there's no book ever written on that. You can only possibly decipher the meanings from reading Irish mythology itself in its whole.
Who was this?
Ogma.
Okay.
Yeah, like as in those runes. The runes. All rune means is word or poem. That's what rune actually means. Like the old in Ireland and in England, the old name for the Our Father was the rune of Father, the Song of the Father. That was the Lord's Prayer. So all I'm doing is like relating the respect for runes in old Irish culture and old European culture with the power of the word in Genesis.
Yeah. This actually relates back to an Egyptian creation story where an Egyptian god created by speaking, and that could be where the Hebrews got this, or they might have just invented it independently. So.
It's because the Assyrians, the Assyrian nobility, when it says in verse 26, created in our image, the Assyrian royals thought that they were created in the image of God as well. I think that's where the Hebrews perhaps got the idea of reigning as gods or like God on the earth. They took it from like the noble traditions, these countries, and they married it into their monotheism because they claimed that their God was the best and the only one worthy of the name.
It could have come from the Assyrians.
That doesn't really answer for me my question, which I've forgotten completely until this moment, is the whole thing of in our image. It just doesn't cut it for me. Like, why would they have God say our?
Do you mean if there's one God, or?
It's contested that there might be a female consort, if that's what you're asking. But I'm just saying, what's with the our instead of my?
Well, because the Hebrews still believed in all the other gods of the Near East. It's just that their God was the God.
They were
henotheists. No, because they didn't believe in them. They thought they were spiritual demons in Greek terms, daemons. They didn't think they were real gods. Like, they didn't pray to them or anything like that. They saw them as an enemy or, oppressors.
But they existed.
But their Yahweh is giving orders to those other gods. He is under total control of them. So they're demoted to just natural and spiritual forces. This is in the appendix to like my Bible anyway. Right. It actually says this. It's not me just making stuff.
All right. Yeah. No. That sounds like it makes sense.
I mean, I'm just saying if you wanted to, I'll send that caption on at some stage. It's actually, I was going to mention that more in reference to chapter 2 because it becomes even more obvious then. I'll get on to that later.
Well, when we come to chapter 2, there's the whole question of why would God create evil? Why did God create a serpent to fuck things up in the first place? And by the way, when we get to chapter 2, I would like to suggest that there's a very good argument for feminism in Genesis.
Don't give them many ideas now. But do you want to move on to chapter 2? I mean, does anyone else have other things to add?
I can move on to chapter 2.
Okay.
Are we entirely certain that we shouldn't read each chapter as we visit it?
I thought we would have. I mean, I've when I done it, I don't really need to. I mean, you can if you want. It's fine. You can read it out.
Well,
if your listeners will benefit.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. We could have a private Skype group if we just want a private Bible study group. But if we want people to join in, not everyone knows the Bible. So, shall I read chapter 2 or Patrick? Or maybe Mike over the CB radio?
I don't actually, I don't have a hand.
You can read chapter 2.
Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. These are the generations of the heaven and of the earth when they were created. In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pagan. That is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it which goeth towards the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates. And the Lord God took the man, and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make and help meet for him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field, but for Adam there was not found an help meet for him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed.
This is the second creation. Remember, second time around. This is the more traditional one. This is like from the second millennium BC, about 1500 BC, maybe 1800. This is the Garden of Eden story. I don't know where to start. Eden, like the meaning of Eden itself is like fertile plain. It's like a Sumerian word, and it was actually a real place in southern Iraq. And actually, a secondary meaning of Eden is delight or pleasure, because it's envisaged as a sort of pleasure park, but not for mankind. It wasn't built for man. It was actually for God himself, so God could garner enjoyment. And if you remember, God actually grew lonely and painfully lonely in this impure realm of pleasure. So he created man and all these different creatures to actually have someone, an intelligent other to converse with. So he could find joy in that other, in seeing growth in that other. And that's perhaps the same reason why he created Eve as well, so that Adam would have had another which to relate to and to actually become more conscious of himself. So,
sounds kind of sadistic.
No, it's the whole premise that Jesus came as well, in the sense that the joy to be found in life is in watching, like, even one's child grow up. There's joy in that. Why is that? Well, you can answer that. But that's the way God, he constantly refers to mankind as his children all the time, and sheep, as in who need leaders to follow, who need shepherds.
Yeah, but dude, if you're going to have like a kid, right? And then, oh yeah, it's great, like having this bond. Are you going to then have another kid who's like really fucked up in the head and then ruins their life? I'm referring to the serpent. Also,
you mean Cain and Abel and the serpent? Okay. Well, God is setting up like these first institutions now, and he's defining the limits, or man is defining his own limits. And this is why God ends up creating the flood, because they turn to debauchery and murder and jealousy and all of that, like particularly the women with jealousy. And so that's why Noah is the only good man, and his family, which he leads, is the only one selected for survival, because he embodies the traits of a child that God desires. It's not because God is sadistic; it's because the people are sadistic, and God is actually trying to alter course. And of course, it's totally within his power to do so, because these people don't have any control. I don't know, like what I would start. Let me read. I don't. Do you have any input first before I make my next point, or
Patrick, maybe?
Yeah, I just want to say about the name Eve. The name Eve means both to give life, but it also means to show or to tell. So Eve means both to give life, and she's called Eve because she's the mother of all life. And there's a creation story. I believe it's among either the Sumerians or some other group of people.
is it the Sumerians and the Igigi? Is it that one?
It's about Ninhursag and Enki. Ninhursag and Enki.
Right.
And in this one, Enki is cursed by Ninhursag, and she removes her life-giving eye from him. And the term life-giving eye almost seems like opposite of the evil eye. One other thing I want to mention that cedar forest, mythology in Sumerian creation, where there's a place called Cedar Forest, which reminds me of Eden. Like the Middle East used to be filled with cedars.
Yeah.
So they cut them all down, which might be related to a system of usury, but that's
probably urbanism and all of that, and pushing out the warrior classes from the tribal systems, because they need the trees and the land and wild nature to kind of survive. Urbanism doesn't need that. They need kind of flat plains, fertile plains. So you could see this as kind of like a type of urban religion coming in, like urban and rural coming together in a way.
Oh, okay.
Because God creates the garden full of trees, and He creates all the fruits which Adam and Eve are to enjoy, and Adam disobeys that, and he is told that he must work for his bread by the sweat of his brow, as in till the land and topple over the trees and wear skins and hunt the animals. Because if you remember at the end of chapter 2 here, like he walks away, or is it from chapter 3? He walks away from God in skins that he hunted for himself and Eve from the animals who he was once friends with. So he no longer understands the wild anymore, or nature, or to a lesser extent he does. So I would say it's going like it's a tale that's trying to explain sort of a urban society and institutional society, because Adam has to create his own institutions in the next chapters. That's what it's about, because he destroyed or rebelled against gods.
Almost like the transformation from hunter-gatherer to agricultural.
Running away from nature. And like in the first chapter, God created the stars as for signs and for festivals. In the next chapter is this really looking at the love affairs between the descendants of Adam and Eve, and the jealousy and the rage, and God trying to command them to stay the course. That's what eventually happens. But I think that's a bit ahead of ourselves.
But it's necessary, like the role that envy plays, or jealousy, or whatever you want to call it.
There's a cosmological question, I think. Like in the other myths that you were referring to, like of the Sumerians, and say of Enuma Elish, like of the flood, and Atrahasis, like that's the Sumerians as well. Like the gods actually create man. It's different from the Hebrew version. Gods create men to actually carry out the servile function of society. So the gods don't have to work and carry out physical labor. And like they make them for the Igigi of the Sumerians, like the gods call the Igigi. They make the men and the women like dig canals and build rivers and dams. And like water in the Bible, especially at the start, is concerned with like wisdom as well, like the waters of wisdom. So they're actually gaining wisdom while watching man work. And all the water is directed towards their needs. So they gain wisdom while man stays in the dark, which is different from the Hebrew version, the Old Testament, where God creates man in order to see him grow, and actually out of love for mankind, he wants to bring him into existence. So this is how like markedly different the Hebrew version would be to the Sumerian or other Mesopotamian civilizations.
Yeah, but being objective though,
I am being totally objective.
But no, I would contest that, because they made man to be slaves, And then the Abrahamic God made man just to fuck with his head.
No, he gave man a chance to exercise the godly functions himself. He raised Adam from the most base element, the abyss, in order to allow him to raise himself up to whatever level he wanted to make his own choices, which they did in chapter 2 and 3.
Can you say that like the fall is kind of like everything like after that, like subsequent to that, all the stories, I guess, like in the Bible, like can you say they're almost like a continuation of the fall? Or I mean, like specifically say like the story of Cain and Abel, you know? I mean, like that couldn't have happened, right, without the fall in like the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, you're dead right, I think. It's just if you want to look at modern perspective, like the genes, the epigenetic content of Adam and Eve still exists in their children, and it manifests in different ways because they're not getting better; they're actually getting worse generation by generation. That's how God opens the floodgates, where the actual term "opening the floodgates" comes from, like the window that was meant to be in the dome that God created to usher in water and rain and life-giving sustenance, or as I said before, knowledge and wisdom. That's what it actually means. God allows the dome to be permeable so that man can receive from him, and he offers back his light to God.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's things that resulted, like, I don't know, like that book I'm reading at the moment as well. There's kind of it's about a particular. They kind of associate like their family name, like Karamazov, with kind of like say like recklessness and kind of like impulsiveness and like just like sensualism, I guess, kind of just being obsessed with like sensual delights and stuff like that, you know. And it's kind of like explored as this kind of cyclical like characteristics that all Karamazovs are like expected to have, you know. And it's kind of almost like there was some kind of fall from grace that isn't like specified, you know, but like you're kind of jumping into kind of like the family history, like, which is kind of after that, after, you know, someone brought their like family name to disgrace or something like that. So there's this, in the book there's this kind of continuation of that in some aspects, and
right. I think it's an offer repeated kind of
a different way.
It's like a sort of a lot of different authors and different traditions would have this in Europe and around the world that kind of copies off that family feud, the infighting. And like the Ulster cycle would be a perfect one, like Ulster and Connacht fighting each other, and this is a web of alliances and interconnections between them all. And like Cuchulainn would be like the Noah, in fairness, because he's like he's technically a reincarnation of the god Lu, because Lu came back in the guise and impregnated his mother, Cuchulainn's mother. He doesn't actually know it; he just slowly reveals itself throughout the cycle. I don't know if he ever fully knew it, but that's what he was.
Was his
so he's
brother?
He's like God's chosen one.
May I ask? This is off topic from Genesis, but all right. So Cuchulainn's brother in Connacht, was he also the son of Lu?
I don't believe he was. No, it was Cuchulainn and Cuchulainn only.
Maternal brothers. All right.
Yeah, was it? Because remember, Lu came in a guise and impregnated his mother. He still had a different, like, his mother was married to someone else.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right, cool.
Adultery, like, he came back as his father. Like Lu came in the guise of his father, I think, and it wasn't actually his father. I believe so. I'm not 100%. But like, to go back to Genesis a bit, like, if you read there, like, I think in verse 6, these waters that create, like, it is super celestial waters that create the Garden of Eden itself, but it's only the Garden of Eden. It's not all over the world yet. It's just where God resides. You know, metaphorically, metaphysically, I don't know, but it hasn't yet spread. It's only when it mentions all the other rivers, the 4 rivers that are actually all in Iraq. I think one is outside Iraq. I think one is in Syria. And this is called into the 4 quarters of the globe in the rest of the Bible, which is God is the axis, that is like the axle of the whole world. It's called, what is the axis mundi, the center of the world, the center that gives meaning to everything else. And these waters are flowing out and actually procreating the Garden of Eden everywhere and introducing God's order into the world. And it's like a natural order, one to do with nature.
It's interesting that you say that, because oftentimes the word of God is related to life-giving water, like and
the Holy Spirit. Like that's when you get baptized.
And also like where the presence of God is, it's fertile. Because if you remember the blessing that God gave in chapter 1, he says, "Be fruitful and multiply." And so, like, wherever you have God, there you have fertility. And we can see this happening in the West right now, where cultural groups that have abandoned God have lost their fertility, whereas the cultural groups that have held on to God have kept their fertility. And so fertility is like a blessing of God. And so in the United States, it's generally like people who live in the Bible Belt who tend to be the most fertile, Hispanic people too, other people, whereas people straight from God, they tend not to be a fertile population.
Yeah, the Europeans and the Japanese and Koreans, for example.
I mean, like, there's sections of Europeans who are holding on to God, like the
Polish. Yeah.
So in a way, these are still living the ideal Edenic kind of lifestyle. Like they surrounded by the natural kind of loves and tastes of the garden. There is 2 trees created in the Garden of Eden. I mean, I'm sure, are you aware of that? It's not just the one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that serpent.
That's what I was wondering.
Is. There's another one. There's a tree of life. That is completely different. That is the one that God anticipated that sometime in the future he would give to man. And that tree of life is actually the tree of immortality, like to become like God, more like God. Because at this stage, Adam is mortal. He just has an extra long life. I think it's like 800 years or something. I don't know, a few hundred years. And they decrease with time, with generations, like up to Noah, because they get increasingly more hostile to each other and hostile to the earth, to Eden, to like the universe. So,
can I ask, is there any metaphysical validity then to Mormonism, where they say that we become gods of our own worlds? Like, as long as we're, completely Mormon, but, leave out the completely Mormon part, but like, that we were supposed to be kinda like God? Don't you think that maybe God thought, hey, maybe one day these guys will run their own show?
I think it's a good metaphor, but I don't really know enough about it to make a solid comment. Like, I don't know if someone else might want to take that one.
Well, I think like a man and a woman are supposed to have dominion over their household in the same way that God has dominion over the earth. So, there's this. I remember reading this British guy from John Locke. John Locke. He wrote a famous essay, I believe, or pamphlet, which was critical of another guy. He said a phrase that I found interesting that John Locke quoted. He said that each man is the prince of his posterity. You know what I mean? And so, like, generations, like, so we sort of like are God in the sense that, like, we're the author of the future generations that come after us. Each man and I would add, like, each man and woman are sovereigns over their future posterity. I mean, you can't like necessarily micromanage or control the lives of your children or anything like that, but also in Western folklore, the blessing or the cursing of a parent carries a lot of power. And so, for instance, if we look at the book of Genesis, we see God cursing Adam and Eve with all sorts of things, and then we see that taking root in their lives. And then if we look at the way in which people raise their kids, like if you call your kids stupid, that there's a good possibility that your kid can become stupid just by calling the kid stupid. Not because that's essentially a curse. So I mean, some people, they use their words to reflect reality. So, but other people, they use their words to create reality. So I mean, even if your kid is stupid, you could call your kid smart in order to create the reality that they're smart, sort of like by contradicting reality.
Yeah, like my mother did for me.
But yeah, I mean, you can even see it like in your own lives. It's like, you know, when you're being introduced to someone, like your family knows or whatever. Maybe not your family knows, but like you're being introduced to someone as like the son of this person, or like you know, the son of this person is your father or your mother. Like depending on who that person is, people have different kind of expectations of you. You know, because like that's all kind of hinging on like your forefathers kind of actions, you know. So like they might expect you to be a certain way, or kind of have a certain kind of potential, you know, which isn't like this kind of solid kind of like thing you can grasp, you know, but you kind of, it's tangible, you know.
Yeah.
You mean like kind of introduced to new people by your traits, or the traits of your family and your parents? Like this is the person who writes the music, you know, talented individual. You mean like that sort of way? So it's kind of creating it in other spheres or other worlds around you, other people's worlds?
It could be like people's ideas of you is kind of almost created, you know, like before your own or something like that. I don't know, like when you're really young, you know, it's just your pure potential, just pretty much all there is. But as you get older, kind of, I think, and kind of people see you as an adult, you know, like they have kind of ideas of who you might be, or like what kind of person you could become based on who, you know, your grandparents were, or your father or mother were, you know.
You know, I have a great example of that. Last year, I had a beautiful relation with a girl that, like, well, from my own hand, just completely exploded. I'll be upfront about that. But I spiraled into alcoholism, and I came so close, like, just a hair's breadth from being labeled by my family and the whole community as an alcoholic because of these few months of where I just went mad. Why? Because of my father.
Oh, right, yeah. Because he had problems with that, right, as well. So, yeah, kind of like you probably have like a lower, how would you say, like it's probably the threshold is lower for people to kind of call you out on that or something like that.
I didn't catch the last word. Did you guys?
Like the threshold for like people calling you out on that is lower for you because of your father.
Yep. I've got to be very careful. And I can see how that could be for anyone of any sort. You know, just look at the royal family, you know? Like, how good of a person do you have to be in the British royal family, or any royal family, to not be labelled as an entitled piece of shit?
Well, yeah, there's pretty big burden on them. I mean, that's a pretty extreme example, you know.
Yeah.
It's like going in the complete opposite direction.
Well, like there is an example like of this in Genesis, like in chapter 2. Like remember where God takes a rib from Adam and creates Eve. What happens anyway is Adam is then allowed to name that new creation. Like it's God allows him to do it because it's actually from him.
Oh, okay.
And he calls her woman. I think she's called Eve later in chapter 3. This is the same idea that we're talking about, that like if like we came from our parents, we came from certain families, so our family actually, by calling us a certain thing, they're allowed to do it. First of all, they have the authority to do it because it came from them, and second of all, it actually becomes what is said about it. It becomes what it's called, its intention, the intention of what you call it. So that's why Eve actually probably was at fault later in chapter 3, because Adam was probably not, I can't accuse him of anything, but perhaps not careful enough because if you look later on, like they're hiding when God comes looking for them. He hears God coming at the start of chapter 3, and they run away and they hide. So obviously, and like I would say, it doesn't say it, but I would say they obviously having sex. You know, they obviously have found when he originally looked at her, he probably had that in mind. So that was probably one of the original faults, the original sin. So I think this intersects a lot, like with what you're talking about. But I did want to mention before we got away from the rivers that there's a 100% parallel in Irish mythology. It's probably copied, like there's a story of King Cormac MacArt. You know him, Mike MacArt. His son. King Cormac MacArt is like the pagan Brian Boru. He's like the greatest pagan king that there was. I think he's dated 3rd or 4th century AD. It adds when he actually lived, but I think he was written in as living in some time in BC by the medieval sources, just so they can make it grander and older. But anyway, his son has to go find the fountain of knowledge, and this is the same as the tree of life. And the fountain of knowledge is like he has to make his way through the land of promise. That's what it's actually called. And this is meant to be the other world, but the land of promise sounds an awful lot like Eden. And in this land of promise, there are 5 rivers, which in Eden, there's 5 rivers. There's God's river at the start that produces Eden, and then there's the 4 rivers that go off in 4 different directions of the world, 4 quarters. And in these rivers, 5 rivers, there's 5 salmon and 9 hazel trees. We were talking about a bit about this before, like, and the salmons eat the nuts from the trees and gain the highest form of wisdom. So they're the salmon of knowledge. This fountain ends up being located in like a dune or a fort with a garden in it, and he finds the fountain. And I forget what happens in the rest of the story, but I think he accomplishes his mission. He takes something from it and to help out his father, and they accomplish whatever they're doing. But like this isn't obviously taken. I would say it's mixed in with a lot of original Irish authentic lore, like about the salmon, like why the salmon. As I said before, it's probably something to do with I can transfer between both worlds of saltwater and freshwater, and like one is godly knowledge and one is terrestrial knowledge. It interchanges back and forth between man and the gods. But I think the actual structure of the world, you know, the actual physical construction, I think that is actually coming from Genesis, and that was the Irish monks were probably doing in order to have it be acceptable to Christian thinkers and to the actual mentality and like character of Irish people. So they wanted some of our own lore in there as well. Because as far as I'm aware, these monks were still quite proud of being Irish. And I mean, it's summed up in the quote like when the controversy of the Easter dating. I think it's Saint Finian. I think it was Saint Finian. He said like Rome is wrong, Antioch is wrong, Alexandria is wrong, the whole world is wrong. Only the Irish and the British are right. That's kind of the way they felt. Like that their thinkers were correct certain things, and the rest of the world, the whole world, was incorrect. Because the Irish and British were very intertwined back then. I would just mention that. I don't know, I just wanted to highlight that kind of intersection with Irish mythology and the salmon. I've been looking at the book of Genesis there, and I was trying to see, is there any surrogate animal there for divine knowledge that you could pinpoint? I would say it is actually the serpent. If you look in the chapter 3, the serpent actually walks upright like a man. He actually walks upright, man, and he's the only animal that's able to talk to humans. All the other animals don't have that ability. That's why he ends up talking to Eve. He's actually can accomplish that. He's the highest form of animal. He's almost like a prototype human, like a failed experiment, Frankenstein. So, and then like after he betrays the human race, he's actually cursed to the lowest form of animal that has to crawl on his belly and is reviled by every other creature, especially mankind.
I was wondering about that when God cursed him to crawl in the dirt and eat dirt. I was thinking, wait, isn't that what he was doing anyway? Because all of the depictions that I have ever seen of the fall, you know, where the serpent is talking to Eve, is it was a serpent wrapping around a tree branch or some shit.
I think I recall seeing somewhere he has legs or something like that.
Serpent represents poisonous speech, not a. It represents poisonous speech, like venom, like a serpent's venom. If you read Josephus, the Jewish Roman historian Josephus, Josephus, however you want to pronounce it, in his account of Genesis, he said that the serpent was envious or jealous of the fact that Adam and Eve were having like a good life in a good situation, and so that he specifically tempted them to disobedience in order that they would be punished by God, so that they would have a. So, if you look at like the Soviet Union, one of the ways in which they would sometimes destroy citizens was encourage them to oppose the authorities in a direct way, in order to bring upon them a punishment from the authorities, in order to, and you can see this like with nowadays with much of the music inciting the youth to criminal activity. It's almost like the serpent encouraging them to disobedience, so that they can then receive they can then be punished by the authorities and potentially lose their natural inheritance.
Yeah.
Like in the Soviet Union, there used to be kind of rewards for kind of ratting people out or whatever for like kind of speech against Stalin, you know. So like people would kind of do that so they could those people would be arrested, like their neighbors or whatever. So they'd be rewarded with their apartments, you know, things like that. It's pretty weird.
Patrick, when you say about venomous speech, that's what it represents. To add into that, I was thinking like the Irish salmon, the way the salmon can breathe in both fresh and salt water. I was thinking in terms of hot and cold-blooded, as in the temperaments of people, the certain type of people, typology. And this one is an undermining aspect, not a true human, a serpent. And the other is fully human, the Adam, who he was jealous of, as you said. And like, there's a prophecy, or it's a judgment by God. It's in 3:15 of that chapter, where he says, let me see it. He's talking about the progeny of Eve, everyone who will come out of the living one, that is Eve. So that's what she means. I think that's what she means, the living, isn't it? They will strike at your head while you will strike at their heel. So that is meant to be, it's called proto-evangelism. It's actually talking about Christ, that him and his children will strike at the serpent, and the serpent will strike back and try to always destroy mankind with his poison, striking at his heel. This is the way you look at, when he's giving that judgment to Eve, Catholics take that as her as being Mary, like the great mother of us all. And that's why you see in art, like Catholic art, where Mary in pictures and in statues is always breaking and crushing the serpent's head underneath her. Did you ever notice that? They're talking about this
back down into the earth.
I mean, yeah, they're talking about this war between the hot and cold-blooded, so to speak. I just point that out. I thought it was quite interesting because that's where that iconography comes from, that exact line.
Is this the cue that we move on to chapter 3, or are we gonna?
We're kind of on chapter 3.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, we interweave because chapter 2 and 3 actually just continue on from each other. They just roll on.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
You know?
It's just, I'm thinking, we've got to keep a format here. Like, are we reading each chapter as we go along, or are we just moving on into it? Now the serpent was more subtle than a beast of the field which the Lord God had made. He said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam, and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou givest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy shall desire be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skins, and clothed them. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat, and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the garden of Eden, to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life.
Well, I just wanted to say something that Mike said, where they hoped to inherit the apartments of the people that they informed on to the authorities. And so I think that maybe the serpent here was hoping to inherit Eden by getting these humans expelled.
Yeah,
maybe that was just...
I never heard an idea like that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, maybe he was betting on Eve, or rather, who was it? Adam? Yeah, Adam not telling God who started it. Maybe it was just that stupid.
Yeah, kind of what I kind of linked it in with was kind of like people kind of using devious means, I guess, kind of to get what they want out of life, you know. Like, I mean, the people that they informed on didn't necessarily do anything in some cases, as far as I understand, for reading like soul units, and and then kind of like interrogation techniques that were used by the NKVD, you know, a lot of them are based off deceit. Like you have like like a man being like interrogated in a room like with a door with like stained glass, you know, like kind of blurry glass or whatever, and they'd bring like a woman like crying in front of it and kind of like say, you know, that's your wife, you know, like she's really upset of what you've done here, and you have her here as well, you know. God. So like you don't like this. There's a whole chapter in the Gulag Archipelago about like interrogation techniques of the NKVD, and like they're pretty terrifying. I've kind of forgot. I can't list them off right now because it's been a while. But like a lot
But
of them are
just
based
that
off
one
kind
is
of,
genius.
Yeah, I'll have to
they're,
look
they're
into that
so
book.
they're so like deceitful. They're almost like ingenious. Like like these ways they kind of devise of like torturing people, just even psychologically. Like I guess it kind of made me think of that kind of stuff too.
It's almost also like another thing is that whole thing where they get powerful people into compromising positions with like either prostitutes or I know back in the day they used to get them into like maybe like a homosexual sort of thing, and then they get pictures of it, and then use that to get them to vote certain ways.
That's like blackmail. That's actually in kind of House of Cards as well. I don't know if you've ever seen that, the modern version. It would have Kevin Spacey, who's this governor, who's they're planning to kind of like get him to run for like the presidency or whatever. But I mean, they're not really like getting him to run for the presidency. They're like only using him as a candidate, or like a weaker candidate that they can destroy or whatever. But so they kind of put him in a compromising position where like his whole like the thrust of his campaign is kind of that he was like a former alcoholic and now he's going to turn his life around and stuff like that, and the slogan's like a fresh start and stuff like that. But they kind of get him involved with this woman and kind of make him like drink again, get hungover, and kind of do this radio interview that he completely flunks, and it ends in his suicide anyway. But that kind of is a similar thing.
Yeah, this is sort of like the whole like idea of like the simple person being like overcome by like the cunning person.
Yeah. It's pretty like it's pretty brutal, like in its various forms, like like Othello as well, I guess. Like kind of like there's manipulation in that of the main character, and there's probably a lot of other things you could think of really like in dramas and like books where that happens too. You can be aware that people have kind of a heart full of snakes or whatever, but you can still trust them anyway, right? Like but you kind of have to remember that people can be deceitful, at the same time.
Trust them to be themselves. That's what I live by.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, in context of that, like in all their ability to be kind of deceitful and kind of manipulative and cunning. Not to say that you should be cynical, I think, but like a step beyond that is kind of realizing what everyone can do, but kind of maybe putting out your hand anyway. Because I don't know, like reading kind of books like that, like Gulag or Capelgo, it's heavy on suffering. It's like some of the like densest like packed suffering you can read in a book, I think. And
I think that's where like Jesus comes into this place, because Jesus is supposed to help people get back into that pre-fall state just by like through the doctrine of forgiveness, like I'm not saying like self-forgiveness towards ourself and stuff, you know what I mean? Like
he's a cosmic, what are they called? Cosmic amnesty.
Yeah, so it's like if a serpent did tempt you to some sort of behavior, there's always redemption through Jesus. So like no matter like what you did, whether it's like, because I think that like the problem that people get in the world is, especially nowadays, is like people feel like spiritually polluted by things they see on TV or stuff they did or something like that. But it doesn't matter what anybody did or what they saw or whatever. Like there's always like a redemption, because behind all that is something good. It's like if you wash off, if something's covered with like dirt and muck and stuff, and then you wash it off, underneath it all, it's sort of like clean. And so maybe like
it's like
maybe
an
our
anchor.
spirits have been polluted, but there's something pure underneath it.
Yeah, it's kind of something like almost like a reference point, I suppose. You can use almost like philosophy as well, I guess. Like things like stoicism and stuff. I don't know, like maybe certain passages in Seneca and stuff that you could kind of repeatedly come back to and kind of times where you feel spiritually polluted, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, but Mike, will stoicism get you into heaven?
No, it's just something I thought of at the time. But I mean, like as an anchor, like your spirituality or religion.
Well, the thing is, Stoicism, if you look at the New Testament, some of the teachings of Jesus appear to have been influenced by Stoicism.
Yeah, I've actually kind of been thinking about linking up, kind of just finding like comparisons, I guess, between passages in the Bible and like the books I've read.
I think you want to look at like the letters of Saint Paul, because he actually studied Stoicism and other Greek philosophies. He actually says why the Stoics are wrong. He names the Stoic. But his letters, like Acts and a few of the other ones he would mention, like the philosophers, means like the Platonists and the Greek schools in general. But like he would reject some of them because first of all, they reject the one true God, and he would give reasons why they reject the one God, because they're modes of fatalism. I think fatalism can be positive though at the same time. Like everything that's actually fated. Like if you're a Roman soldier, you believe that the battle is already destined. Like it's already being predestined who wins that battle. You still fight your very best. That's your assigned role in life. So there's two sides to fatalism. One is that everything's decided. The second is that since it's already decided, you have your chance now to perform your duty as best as you possibly can. So it gives you kind of a feeling of invulnerability, which is another teaching of Stoicism. Look at St. Paul, because he actually probably borrows a lot from them as well, besides giving them the backhand.
Perhaps, I
think the whole of the New Testament does, in fact. Just like the naming of the book Genesis, it's like Greek philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, like it's not something that I've looked into. It's something that I've just kind of considered, and kind of reading the Bible a bit more, because I've read quite a lot of Seneca, and like Epictetus is like Enchiridion, and Marcus Aurelius is easy to read because he just has meditations, but I do love the works of Seneca myself. They're more kind of like literary.
They're more. He's kind of. I used to not like him when I was a bit younger. At least not as much as Marcus Aurelius, especially, and Epictetus. But I felt that what he was saying was just a bit too obvious. But there's layers and layers underneath what he's actually saying, and when he puts it all together in his letters, I like his letters the best, by the way.
I have his letters. So.
I think it's just time-honored wisdom what he's actually saying, and he went from, I think, the richest man in the Roman state in his time, because he's a huge landowner, loads of pristine Italian land, growing wine and all of that.
He was an advisor to Nero as well, wasn't
he? Yeah, and he technically signed it all away to Nero for his life, and he was exiled for a bit. He got brought back, so he came from and he almost, when he was on, I think Sardinia he was exiled to. He considered taking his life many times out there, but it was always, he says, that's when he reached what we would call peak stoicism, because he found reasons to continue living, and he eventually got the call. He attributes that's where the fatalism comes back in. He attributes that he was meant to do that, in order to get the call back to Rome.
Interesting.
And so he goes from the richest man to one of the poorest men without status at all, because he's exiled. He's like worse than a slave.
I think he was kind of opposed to slavery in a sense as well. I think in some of his letters he kind of.
Seneca was kind of a man in two worlds. Like he had one foot in philosophy and one foot in the world, because he owned plenty of slaves. Because he might have been against it, but
I think he was kind of more the treatment of them or something like that, as opposed to he wanted to abolish slavery. He was just kind of more opposed to the really awful treatment of them.
I remember in one of his letters, he's in the gladiatorial arena, and he's just he has to go because it's a social function. He doesn't want to be there exactly. He has to go there. He's looking at the two gladiators, and he's looking around him to the crowd, and they're all one is being defeated, and he's tired, he's exhausted, he collapses on the ground, and now they get to decide whether he lives or dies. What is that winning gladiator going to do? And most of the crowd are like, kill him, he didn't fight well in the first place. This is the guy beside him, he says, he didn't fight well in the first place, he was a poor performer, he deserves to die. And Seneca turns around and says to him, what did you do in your life that makes you worthy to say that? And the guy obviously had no answer. He's just saying it. He's just writing it as an afterthought, because I believe that man died. It sounds like that way in his story, the way he recounted it. But he said we must earn the right to even say these sorts of things. These men, way in Seneca's mind, these men gave it their all, and they actually performed their function, and they did what they were supposed to do, and therefore they were worthy to live on to fight another day because they were entertained. And the kind of funny aside in this is like he's like bemoaning, like I think earlier in the letter, like that everyone wants like a fast, ferocious fight these days in the gladiatorial arena without any technique. It's kind of like wrestling versus Olympic style wrestling. Like everyone wants that, and when they don't get their own way, they just ask to kill the gladiator. He didn't like that either. So it's like they want the hit straight away, like with loads of blood, all of that, like and like chanting and slogans, and these weird fighting styles as well. He didn't like that kind of would hope to be killed, but it looks more exciting. These are just kind of funny asides, like but he's pretty he's a very good one to read, I would say. But
I think so. Yeah, because the letters kind of feel like they're addressed to you, even though they're addressed to like his students or whatever.
Lucius.
What are we talking about now? What are we talking about?
Seneca and his letters. We are we finished the Old Testament? I mean, because
yes, we finished the Old Testament. Let's hurry along to the New Testament. No, we're beginning Genesis 3.
Well, okay, I want to say something about that, but I like Seneca too. So, I mean, I don't mind talking about Roman stuff, but I just want to say that like Jesus represents like the victory over, like even like in the New Testament they say it represents victory over the serpent, right? I mean, I don't like saying serpent because I don't want to like get people mad at snakes or whatever, but it represents like almost like the victory, like it represents the concept that the heart is more powerful than the head, I think, because it's like serpent tries to use intelligence to corrupt people and then like mislead them and stuff like that, but then it's like the power of just like forgiveness and love or whatever can like redeem and heal people. So I mean, I think there's always redemption like wherever people are, but I really like Seneca though.
It's an interesting concept. I mean, it's pretty powerful one as well, really. It comes up in like I'll just try and get through this quickly because I don't want to screw up the format of the show. But in that Dostoevsky book as well, Karamazov Brothers, there's a whole kind of like chapter about how like Jesus comes back, and like kind of the church is just kind of opposed to him coming back, because he's kind of like upset all the order that they've created. And well, like long story short, he basically forgives them for it anyway, even though they kind of like intend on like executing him for kind of coming back and performing some miracles. But in his forgiving the church and kind of the elders of the church, they end up kind of letting him go. It's kind of a powerful. It's called a Grand Inquisitor. It's pretty powerful chapter.
Wait, so in forgiving the church, they let him go?
It kind of ends with Jesus kind of like just basically saying nothing the entire time. That the Inquisitor is like giving him his reasons for like that he's going to have him executed. And Jesus is silent the entire time, and he basically just like kisses him on the lips, and the kind of Inquisitor just sits there kind of motionless and kind of has left the like cell door open, and Jesus just walks out.
Well, that's a pretty good message. I like that one.
Yeah, it's actually an aside, like a whole story that has been written by a character in the book who's an atheist, and is kind of
a short story, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it is kind of like a short story within the book that's written by one of the Karamazov brothers, who's like just this intellectual atheist, It's
what makes me think like, I think that like people should love like a Christians. They shouldn't like be against like atheists or anything like that. Like, because if you have like a nation,
it's a fine line, I think.
I think if you have like because like one of the things they try to do is like they try to like get people like a civil war between like the right and the left. Like they want us to almost like go against ourselves, like the right and the left. But people shouldn't do that. Like I think like if people are right wing, they should just like love people on the left and not like view them as like demons or whatever.
Well, like Yeah, Dostoevsky, I guess, was kind of an example of that because he was like Eastern Orthodox. So he was religious, but yet he would still create these kind of like atheist characters who had like really, really strong arguments, like against God and against like the church and stuff like that. Whereas like I think like maybe some like Christians in this country wouldn't even be able to consider the arguments, like just maybe even think of them. Not that they wouldn't be intellectually like capable of thinking of them or anything like that, just that they like wouldn't allow themselves to think things like that or kind of engage with people in dialogues about things like that, which I don't think is good.
Yeah, it's dangerous because if you're not seeing like the humanity in other people, you sort of like risk losing your own humanity.
Yeah. Like I was in like a Christian bookstore in Dublin recently. I got a book in the Proverbs, and there's like the bookkeeper said she was like using to sell like this like kind of like this fancy Bible to some woman, because she thought like he had too many Bibles at the moment or something like that, or like she's being too sinful or something like that, or she should have kind of been a bit more like living not in poverty but kind of living with so many material things or something, and just saying she's sinful over and over again. I was kind of just listening to it. It was kind of weird. I don't know, maybe too much of that behavior can like kind of put people off or something.
Too much what, like about material things turns people off, you're saying?
Just like non-tactful like judgment, I guess. Just constantly telling someone they're sinning. Basically, they're just kind of missing the mark. They're not living up to their potential. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to be like well, Satan. The word Satan means accuser, and so if you're always accusing people of sin, you're like being a Satan, even if you think you're serving Jesus.
That's scary.
Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah, well, he's always behind you, isn't he? He's always where you can't see him.
So are we going to move on to chapter 3? Because I have an itching question. Like, well, not a question, but like more protest against God. Right?
Okay, what's up?
Okay, so, like, I don't know, man. Am I supposed to take, like, Genesis as a blow-by-blow, this is exactly what happened, nothing happened in between kind of thing? When you recall a story, you kind of recall the data points when big things happened. Like, but questions, conversation could have happened. How many times did Adam and Eve have a conversation with God? Because what I'm driving at here, before Eve was created, God said, don't eat of the tree of good and evil, right? And then Eve was born, created, and then suddenly this snake comes along and says, hey babe, you should eat that tree. Oh, eat the fruit of the tree.
Well, yeah.
So like, dude, it's like the first manifestation of the toxic patriarchy.
No, well,
God is a man, Adam is a man, and they conspired against this woman and then put the blame on her.
It's possible.
I mean, but you have to like I think the next verse or two, Satan, or only later he became Satan, but the serpent, he calls God a liar. He says, surely you shall not die. He says you can have this. Look how good it is. And
yeah, but
it says
dude,
that like
she wasn't there when God said, don't eat that. All she heard was, yeah, you heard God said that? Pfft, no, man, go ahead and do it. Do you hear what I'm saying?
No, I think he said it to both Adam and Eve. And
no,
it was actually...
No, he said it to Adam, and then Eve was created. And then the serpent said, yeah, sure, do it.
Well, you know what? This would be a good argument to be using against God, to be all like, okay, look what happened. You should just like return us to Eden. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
if you feel like you've
file a petition.
If you ever been like judged for like something, you can be like, God, you deserve to forgive me because look what I found out here.
Yeah, I'm like in essence, it's almost something that's completely out of our control, if there was a way of reversing it. So in a sense, we kind of
who are these two people to fucking decide our fate? Come on.
Well, that's what I mean.
Like,
Like, you know, it's like you can. It's like it's a weird question. It's like you can be resentful about it, or like kind of.
I think that's on the emotional level, it's absolutely correct what you're saying. But I think Eve agreed to belong to that institution. Like she came from Adam, and the institution of the world at this point is that the man is at the head of the society of between male and female.
What choice did she have? Wander into the abyss?
Well, it's not a choice. She is actually the same substance as Adam himself. It's just a different way, a different person. Both sexes need an other.
This is what I'm saying, man. Toxic patriarchy. God and Adam, and she had no choice. She was just there like some fucking whore.
What I find interesting about this is Adam essentially seems like he blamed Eve for it to God. It seems like he snitched. He seems like he snitched on Eve because God is like, "What happened, Adam?" And he's like, "No, it was a woman."
Yeah, it's like kind of comical, you know, because like it's like when anybody lies, they kind of just start, you know, twitching and sweating and like looking around the place.
Well, that's what 3-year-olds do.
I don't. 3-year-olds have no shame, but Adam did have shame. I would say Adam's more like an actual man now, after like an adult, after they consume that fruit. The thing is, it's implicit in when he takes the rib from Adam and creates her, that God is saying to Adam, you must guide this woman. And he let her do that. And he let the person he's supposed to guide destroy him and actually commit a form of like, I don't know, I was going to use something stronger there, but like a form of just a lie, a murder of like the trust between God and man. Like he allowed it to happen. So Adam is actually the one that's really responsible for all of this. Yeah.
So it's kind of like.
And in the end, he said to God, like, "No, it was her that did it. She told me to do it. That fucking pussy."
Yeah, but it's incorrect, like, of course, but like, he's judged first. I think he was the first one that got judged, and then the serpent, and then the woman, or then the woman, then the serpent. So like he's forced to take the blame. He's forced to take the judgment, not the woman, not even the serpent. The woman is held more liable than the serpent. The serpent is the least liable because I'd say they obviously knew what that serpent was supposed to be, because they knew the creatures of the garden, and they knew he was as way it says Christ says, "Be wise as serpents." They knew that he possessed the same wisdom as God, and they did.
And another kind of question is like, you know, when she was tempted by the serpent or whatever, how did the serpent kind of talk to her, you know? And like, I mean, not just what was said, but the manner in which it was said, you know, because like, you can sugarcoat absolute lies, you know, and kind of have them look really alluring, but then kind of you can lie in a way that is kind of obvious as being, you know, like you can tempt someone in a way that like they know on some level that, you know, what you're tempting them by is going to maybe not be so dramatic as to say like destroy them, but kind of harm them, you know, like people voluntarily do things that harm them and are tempted into doing things which they know are going to harm them, and so there's kind of that question for me as well.
Can I point to the elephant in the living room? The elephant wearing the atheist t-shirt.
Okay.
Why would God create a creature, man, that is so fucking gullible, and then create a creature which is the serpent, which is really fucking sly? Like, why would you even set up that set of circumstances?
It means it's a test of sovereignty. It's like he's seen as worthy to
but
actually control all creatures in that world.
You created the man, and you created the serpent.
Well,
like, there's no mystery there.
What's the point of living if there's no challenges? What is the point of that? What is the point where you would never grow? Where you just have everything easy, and you're basically like the gods of the other Sumerians and the Mesopotamians, where you just sit back and watch all your slaves work, all your underlings.
Dude,
what's the point of that?
If I created a little robot, okay, I'm going to use a Rick and Morty reference, to bring me butter, Okay, if I were to make a robot to bring me butter in the morning on the breakfast table, and then asked it to win a game of chess against a chess master, and then I got angry at the butter bringer robot for not winning that chess match, that would be pretty fucked up, right?
Well, you're assuming that God is good.
Well, yeah.
Probably more like
he's
Orson Welles or
God.
something.
Well, actually, but if you read the Old Testament, it says that both good and evil come from God. So, by Old Testament standards, both good and evil come from God. Because, like, if you read the book of Job, in the book of Job, Satan is afflicting Job, but Satan is only afflicting Job by God's permission.
God allows Satan to,
You can't do it without God's permission.
That's really interesting.
So we're inside this like sick experiment by this
God
sadistic
allows,
asshole.
It says in the New Testament that God allows these demons to come after us and to even possess us sometimes for our own benefit at the end. Because, like we're talking about earlier, if this wasn't this challenge in life and both temptation and opportunity for growth, we wouldn't have, sure, the KGB, but we never would have Seneca either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so but Seneca is just there to remedy what was the KGB in his own time. Like, so why don't you just let us float around in the abyss forever, not existing in the first place? I mean, that would sound more compassionate.
This is not like a similar case with the Indo-European religions, like in the Bhagavad Gita or in Irish mythology, like the Fenian cycle or whatever, that we exist to defeat these evils. That's what, like, anyone who chooses wins honor in heaven. Or in the Bhagavad Gita, as he says to Arjuna, Lord Krishna, he says, if you do not fight throughout the eternities, you will be remembered forever for your dishonor, and you'll never attain the highest wisdom, which is in Brahman.
Like a man must go forth.
Yeah, that's what Adam is actually called for to do. And just like Cullen is called for to do. And then we complain when the first evil we come by oppresses us. That's not the world. The world is full of evil. And it's good. It's full of good too. So I would echo what God said in chapter 1. And he says, he created the world, and on the Sabbath, he saw that it was very good, even though it contained the evil, because it has possibility rather than the world of automatons that bring us order, so to speak.
And there's also like the whole concept that one of the reasons God created humankind, or was partly to perfect, like the purpose of us is to perfect God in a sense.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
by becoming like better people, God like that's also, it's part of like human redemption is also the redemption of God too. And so if you can see like maybe like a possible what seeming imperfection in God, and if you can forgive God for that, then surely you can forgive yourself for anything you've done. Or any imperfections in other people.
That would be the kind of ultimate kind of forgiveness, I suppose, like to forgive like a force that kind of like has caused all of this, and not to be like resentful for anything that exists in it, in spite of how horrible it could be. I mean, you can imagine every kind of horrible thing under the sun that exists.
Well, there's a parallel there between forgiving your father and, I think like 90% of us, I think 90% of us can relate to this, where, our fathers have fucked up in a royal way on some level, and we need to like part with them, but in a peaceful manner. So, I can see that.
Would you not say that you may have to understand your father to see what he has done and how it has affected you? You could apply that to God, even.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but God is supposed to be almighty and perfect.
Well, he lives through us, as it says in the New Testament. Like that's how he exists upon the earth. Like Meister Eckhart said, for example, we all need to become mothers of God, because God is always needing to be born. God exists through our senses and our perception. and Christ is the embodiment of that, like the ultimate embodiment, who will arrive again to actually represent the pure human, the perfected human, which we're all trying to be. But continue on where I thought was going.
Yeah, I think you're holding God to too high standards, Howard. Like, I don't think you should really like put that much expectation on God. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
to put expectations upon God is the same thing to me as putting expectations on yourself. Like every time someone blames God, I feel that they should be blaming not God, but looking at themselves. Like,
because we are God, created in His image.
Well, because God allows. But go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
Well, I think in the same vein, I guess, you know. I mean, like, I guess with all myths and stuff like that, and kind of like, yeah, I just gotta always try and relate things to myself in a way, kind of, you know, and I find that kind of generally helps me understand a bit better the way I think it go on.
There was actually like a defense of icons by an Orthodox, I believe, bishop or priest or something. And this defense is mentioned in one of Calvin's works called a treatise on relics. And Calvin mentions that in his work, he mentions that both Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity are actually just paganism dressed up in Christian clothing. So that's what he puts forth. And he mentions an argument that an Orthodox authority gave in defense of icons, whereas the argument was that the icon was one with, like an icon of Jesus, for instance, would actually be one with Jesus, just as the shadow of a person is one with the person. So the image, both the image and both the image and what the image represents are one. And so if God created people in the image of God, then that means people are one with God by that set of reasoning. You know what I mean? And so, you know, forgiveness of people is sort of like forgiveness of God in a sense by that standard. But you can take that, like, you know, and so that's part of redemption, seeing like the good in people, seeing the good in the world is part of the process of redemption. And so we got to see ourselves as like saviors of God in a sense.
There's another parallel, like in Eastern Orthodoxy for certain, Catholicism maybe, where the guardian angel, just like the icon, the way that shadows is the shadow of whatever saint that belongs to or depicts. In Eastern Orthodoxy, your guardian angel is actually yourself, with the archetype of yourself as if you had been like Christ, and it's that yourself that is actually protecting you from evil. That light that exists somewhere, it does exist with God in heaven, because remember, there's one part with God and there's another, your soul here, and this is what you're calling on to defend you from Satan all the time. Every time you make a correct decision, you're calling on that guardian in yourself.
This is what the New Age people would call.
That's why you're praying. You're praying for that. You're praying to your guardian angel.
Yeah, it's more kind of mystical or something than I don't know, the beliefs that I'm familiar with. And yeah, like you said, it is kind of what they would call, like New Age people would call your higher self or something like that.
Except this has actual like tangible tradition going back thousands of years. A good thing that I would look up for you is like, if you ever heard of it, like apophatic theology. Have you ever heard of that? Apophatic theology.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Or it's just negative theology.
Negative theology.
Negative theology. It's like we're used to cataphatic theology. That means positive theology, where we know what God is. Like God is light. He's love. He's in heaven. He made the Garden of Eden. Like we're qualifying God in the positive. But apophatic theology is based on negation, like saying what God is not just saying it, but thinking it, and actually practicing a learned ignorance, as in where you're filtering out all of the bad stuff in your environment, and what left in theory or practice experientially will be God. The best thing you can do is look it up, because it's a very, very kind of complicated thing. I used to have a quote on hand to explain to people from John Origena, who was like the guy on the back of £5 note, the old £5 note. He's an Irish philosopher. He was an apophaticist. I could get it now if you want to talk, but like I'll just search it.
It's
good. It's good article.
Yeah, I've been meaning to read more about Orthodox Eastern Orthodox Church because just because it's related to Dostoevsky, you know, and I just kind of thought it might kind of give me some insight into like the way some of his books are written, or like some of the characters that exist within them.
I think that Catholicism is not as mystical as Orthodoxy, but it's like 95% there. So it's just a matter of like a tiny bit. It's just that the difference between that 5% is that you could walk into a church like in an Orthodox country and the priest will understand your point of view if you're more from the mystical side, and he will accept that. Whereas in a Catholic country, especially like Western Europe, they mightn't understand you at all because they're so used to a different kind of theology.
Pretty interesting. Yeah.
But it's accepted within the Catholic Church. It's just not mainstream anymore since about the 19th century or the early 20th.
Yeah, it's kind of the impression I get. Yeah.
Because let me see.
People gotta be like, that like, you know, if an icon is destroyed or like a statue is destroyed, I think that's like an attack on a spirit that the statue represents. Or potentially.
Yeah, it's like kind of like an attack on a set of values almost, or something like that, or like the ultimate kind of form of something. I don't really know to express it, but yeah, I mean, like in some parts of Ireland, like you kind of see communities and like there's a suburb or something, and like in the center of it there's a grove, you know, or something like that. And it kind of has this kind of like impact, I guess, on the area or something like that. You know, it changes it tangibly anyway. Like grottos are pretty common here. This is just kind of like a cave type structure with like an area in it.
Yeah, they help purify the area, like a grotto. Yep. Like I would say, like a grotto is like the opposite of like I don't know, some like some of these TV channels spreading hysteria.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, I mean something like that, as opposed to like a billboard or something like that, you know, some like a meaningless advertisement for something you don't need or something that's even harmful to you. Like, it's better.
We all need a place and a time where there is motionlessness, where there is just a freezing of time. Like even, and Mike, you'll know where I'm talking about. There is a grove in Knocknacarra, and I think it's across the road from a hotel.
Oh yeah.
It's the road that goes from the West Side shopping district. It goes to Salt Hill, and often there is heavy traffic. But when you're in that area, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It
really is a holy place.
That's why I used to kind of like going into churches, I guess, when I was in unfamiliar places or like new places, because not to participate really, but just to be super quiet, so you can actually kind of hear yourself think, you know, and it's strangely calming, and it's rare as well, actually, to be in a place of like almost total silence, apart from like that, and even then, it might not be completely silent, but yeah, it's a good thing in my opinion. Anything that kind of gives people pause, like, and helps them like reflect on like how they're living their lives, I guess.
I agree.
what were we talking about before John went away to look for something?
I think the Eastern Orthodox Church, and just kind of mystical Christianity. He mentioned like that kind of almost higher self idea, and kind of your guardian angel being like a version of you that's like kind of closer to
we are actually the word ourselves. We are the Logos, because the Logos is now in the world since the creation, and especially since the time of Christ, where it was revealed to us that this was true, that we are Logos, people, humans, the children of God. That's what Christ's truth was, and through that we could have salvation from sin. And so, like, we are God's eyes and His touch, His senses in the world. And the Son is born through us today in time, unendingly. That is how the theology of Catholicism works, at any rate. But the thing is, this is the type of negative theology, because you're saying, that God is not up in heaven at this moment, directing the world, the grand director. We are God, because I've negated that image, because it's just an image, it's not truth. You see what I mean? That's negative theology. Negative theology means that image that we are presented with in art and in narration through words, it's not actually valid, because I see God in myself. Not that I am God, but God wills certain things through me, which is what the Orthodox call, the perfected guardian angel self, and I act in the stead of God.
Yeah, it's
negative theology. That's what I was fishing for when I asked that question. Like, there is no other way, as far as I'm concerned, no other way to God but, as the Christians put it, negative theology.
That's the way of the pure Holy Spirit. Like Origenus says, like, we do not know what God Himself does not know what He is, because He is not anything. Literally, God is not, because He transcends being. That's what Origenus had to say about it. Well, I think there is a possibility to the mainstream sort of Christianity, which is more popular today. I think that is equally true. That's like the more extroverted type of Christianity that wants to see the world as mechanical, and that you can manipulate it and be a good person through doing good deeds, through works. Whereas negative theology, this also pairs up with like the intellectual side, and like you're looking like towards the Virgin Mary, like asking her for divine wisdom.
You mean like kind of looking, I don't know, like looking inward or something like that? Because just as an aside, an aside, and I think Howard mentioned this once, but kind of like, I suppose, like, kind of say like, what do you say, like an experience. Maybe you can only say like you've had a religious experience and you've kind of seen how kind of opposite to God you've been, or something like that. I don't know, like I suppose, like,
say that, yeah.
If I think of like sometimes in my life where like I haven't like treated like my brother as well as I could have, like that would kind of like actually looking on that and kind of reflecting that would, like, prompted change in how I kind of like treated him and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. You're doing in this situational way, but I agree with what you're saying. But the way I would actually explain it is, negative theology, you're looking at pure experience, pure experiential side. That means like you're engaging in mental prayer, you're guarding your thoughts and keeping them Christ-like, or as best you can. You're maintaining a certain image of your perfect self, your Christ. But the other form of theology, cataphatic or positive, you're looking at the world as a chain of cause and effects, out there, around the place. You're not really maintaining any sort of rigorous uprightness inside you. You're actually going out into the world performing kind of works, and they're all situational, like you mentioned, but you're trying to bring it back into the negative. But other people won't be doing that. They see, if they feel bad about something, they'll try and perform a work to correct it, rather than changing themselves on the inside, like on a kind of constant experiential level.
And then sometimes you kind of get that phenomena of people who are like doing good works and stuff, but they're not well, I mean, nobody's perfect, but I mean, they kind of have flaws, like character flaws that come through.
Yeah, like I think one of the things with like works, I think is important is if you're doing good works, but you're still seeing people as like wretched and horrible, you're still doing something bad because you're through your perception of them, you're pretty much damning them to hell, at least your community. And
Yeah,
I
you
think that,
think
like,
you're better than them fundamentally.
Sometimes.
the other thing is that the Greek word for sin is called like missing the mark, and so say if like somebody like say if you like mistreated a family member or did something else, or a family member mistreated you or whatever,
Sure.
Rather than view that as like some sort of eternal like damnation thing, like just view it as like missing the mark, something just to be like corrected, almost like a minor, even if it had like consequences that weren't minor. It's important not to be too hard on yourself over that, and just like it's okay, just correct it. Even if something horrible happened, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you're not kind of fully reaching your potential, kind of like missing the mark. I used to think it was kind of like missing the point or something, but missing the mark is a better translation of it or whatever. Yeah, I mean, in the cases where it's something completely extreme, it's when you bring arguments to extremes like that, I suppose like you kind of have to forgive yourself. I suppose even in spite of like doing something extreme. I don't know exactly what that would feel like. But it is kind of like it is a scene in like Dostoevsky's books, like in Crime and Punishment. The main character does something like terrible. He just like he ends up murdering two people, and in the end, he kind of like there's a kind of redemptive element to the end of it, I suppose, and that's kind of explored. But most of the novel is actually just about his suffering, Yeah, pretty powerful bit. But I kind of have questions as well about that, though, because I mean, you can forgive yourself for something you did, but can you forgive someone else for something they did to someone else? Or does that person who had the terrible thing done to them have to forgive that person?
Or can you forgive yourself for not forgiving them?
Well, say if somebody murdered someone you knew, could you forgive the murder, or does the forgiveness have to come from that murdered person who can't forgive them anymore?
I think it's a gray area, because I think that like you can both forgive them and not forgive them, and if you don't forgive them, I think you should forgive yourself for not forgiving them, because if you take forgiveness to its ultimate conclusion, you have to forgive yourself for not being forgiving, and so that's like it almost creates like a paradoxical situation. Where you can be like judgmental while being non-judgmental at the same time, because you're not being judgmental of yourself for being judgmental.
Yeah, I get what you mean. But it's like, it kind of seems like sometimes when people don't forgive people for things, even if they're really horrible, it kind of stultifies them or something like that, or they get stuck, or something like that, or just brood on things, or I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of liberating.
I think it could have that effect. Like, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it would always have that effect. I mean, I don't know. I think that there are some gray areas where like discretion can be like exercised. Like, I do think that like we could apply forgiveness to everybody, and that would be cool. But I do think that the doctrine of forgiveness would also enable us to have select instances where we don't forgive people, but we forgive ourselves for not forgiving them, and so we exercise judgment, but in a sense do it in a pure way where our souls remain pure in the midst of it. Because I mean, if you can forgive God for judging Adam and Eve, you can forgive yourself for exercising judgment too. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that the doctrine of forgiveness could be applied. I don't know. But I do recognize could be applied universally. But I do recognize there are some gray areas where discretion can also be exercised.
Yeah, there are gray areas. I mean, say in the instance of like, okay, say.
My camera here, I think. Oops.
Oh yeah.
Can you see me?
I can see blackness.
My phone is just locked, so I can't see anything.
There we go. Yeah, turn it off. I'm outside, like on my bench, so
cool.
I'm just sitting outside the front house, like. But I wanted to kind of weigh in as well, like it just the forgiveness has another direction as well, and that is the direction Christ brought forth, which is that you can actually take on the sins of others. Say someone has murdered somebody else, you can take on the sin as if you murdered that person, like as you become the scapegoated, and you do this by praying on their behalf as if you were them. So that you're just praying for that person. By praying for that person, you take on their sins. That's why, in confession, the priest actually takes your sins and then offers them up to God, and God expunges the sin. He's actually taken the sin from you to himself, like Christ.
Some kind of transmutation, because actually that was kind of weird. Is in answer to the question I kind of was going to ask, but it was kind of like a similar kind of theme. It was like, say it's like, say if someone murders someone you know or something like that, and I mean, like experientially, like you can't know exactly what it was like for that. You can know facts and stuff like that, about how it happened and stuff like that, and circumstantial like facts, maybe in some quite a large amount of detail, but it's kind of hard to know exactly how it was for them, you know. And to be able to like forgive someone for something you can't fully kind of replicate the experience of, you know, like I suppose you could get to kind of understand. I don't know, you know.
Well, you can always just pray the imprecatory. I don't know how to pronounce imprecatory psalms. The Psalms of Imprecation. You know those? The Psalms of Imprecation.
I don't think so. I don't know if you know them. I know of the Psalms, but I don't know that one.
The Psalms of Imprecation are when you pray for justice. So, which means like you could pray for God to like curse them. You can pray for God to curse them if they did something evil to somebody, like if somebody, like you could pray for the person to be cursed. Say, God, curse this person. You know, you could do that.
Yeah.
And then you could forgive yourself for doing that after you do it.
Yeah, like I don't know, my kind of understanding of like the whole process of forgiveness is kind of like, I suppose like kind of mystical stuff in general. It's like kind of like that state of grace is almost kind of like, I don't know, it kind of seems to me like it's like being kind of okay with everything that's in the world and everything that happens with it, no matter how terrible it is, like no matter how like disruptive it seems or something like that. You know what I mean? Like you know, like how many of us can really say like, if you know, like I fell and like broke my leg tomorrow, you know, that's okay with me, or like, you know, if I was like driving my car to work and I like rear-ended another car, that's okay, you know. Or like even more extreme things, you know, it's like terminal illness, and like, is that okay with you? Or like is it a kind of like seamless flow of experience where like, you know, you're aware that this has always kind of been the way it is, and like there's always been this potential for these things to happen? Or like, you know, is that the case anyway, but I'm not going to be aware of it? So I mean, you could even say that with like someone who's murdered, I guess, you know, even if you don't experientially know exactly what it was like, it's like there was always the potential for that to happen. And as terrible as it is, you know, it's like, you know, like funerals and stuff in that instance would kind of, for me, kind of must be like a way to kind of come to terms with that, or something like that, like a social kind of way of coming to terms with this thing that we all knew could happen, or, you know, but didn't really maybe express all the time.
I think there's like, I don't know, I think you can go both ways in that situation. Like you could, if you wanted to, you could like love the person who committed that crime, and you could forgive them, and you could be okay with that. Or if you wanted to, you could pray for that person to be cursed. You know, like it's. Yeah. I think there's like in certain situations, I think there's an element of discretion that a Christian or anybody really can exercise in their spiritual life, and like what they sort of do with their prayer life.
Yeah. For me, so, like, I don't know, like I think the cursing like the actual cursing of the person, and then say murdering something is actually like them murdering someone pretty much is cursing themselves already.
Yeah.
You could say that. You could forgive them and like just totally like redeem them and love them and give them a hug and say
yeah,
that.
but they still might be like completely like damned by what they did themselves, you know. I don't know.
I think the Christian teaching anyway says that we should pray for the best in that person. But I always, like yourself, I always seen as the mother as having kind of coercive consequences. Well, I think by praying for something good, like imagine what it takes for that person to change and what hell that would be by going through all that to actually come out a good person in the other end. So that is a form of kind of like it's not a course in a proper sense of it, but you're actually going to bring a lot of bad stuff to that person before they get better by praying that they get better.
Yeah, but that's actually what happens in Crime and Punishment. Like, not to ruin it or whatever, but like after like the main character like commits murder, it like changes him completely. You just he's not the same person at all. Like like after he commits the murder, and he's redeemed by this kind of like this kind of religious woman, I guess, you know, just kind of tries to see the best in him. Like, it doesn't fully go into like his redemption or whatever. It does say that there is going to be like more trials or whatever before like he is fully redeemed or whatever. But the same thing that happens in that, and like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. She doesn't even really do anything. Like, she doesn't even really know that much. She doesn't even really know exactly what happened. Like, you know, like, yeah, she just knows that he ends up in Siberia in prison, like, and then just says that she'll wait for him, like, more or less, you know. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that like I think everybody's capable of redemption. Like I'm not sure like if curse prayers or imprecations are justified, but I would like to read a paragraph from one of the Book of Psalms. And so if you look at Psalm 109, and I'm just going to start here at verse 6. The guy's saying, like, God, appoint someone evil to oppose my enemy. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is tried, let him be found guilty, and may his prayers condemn him. May his days be few. May another take his place of leadership. May his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. May his children be wandering beggars. May they be driven from their ruined homes. May a creditor seize all he has. May strangers plunder the fruits of his labor. May no one extend kindness to him or take pity on his fatherless children. May his descendants be cut off. May their names be blotted out from the next generation. May the iniquity of his fathers be remembered before the Lord. May the sin of his mother never be blotted out. May their sins always remain before the Lord, that he may blot out their name from the earth. And so
this is fucked up.
So this is Psalm 109. And so they're basically what this is a prayer
sorry
for.
That guy. I didn't even know he did myself. Sorry. I wouldn't do that.
That's my new daily psalm. That is first thing in the morning every day.
What's the numbering on the first, like?
Psalm 109. It starts at verse 6.
Oh, that's actually a psalm. So that's like, yeah, that's the one. That's one you're talking about, was it? The one that.
Yeah. There's actually a few psalms like that, isn't there? And a few parts of the Bible that are pretty much like that.
There's about 20 psalms like that, and they're basically praying here for the guy's family to go extinct.
Yeah, that's like insane.
Yeah, there's lots of prayers like that for in the Old Testament, and so that's considered, that's a prayer for justice.
Yeah,
one of the prayers for justice.
Yeah, 90% of Slayer lyrics are tamer than that.
Yeah, that was hardcore.
So I mean, like the Book of Psalms, it's interesting. If you read the Book of Psalms, it's interesting because they have another verse from like the Old Testament. It says that no weapon an enemy raises against me shall prosper, or something like that. And so it's all about like psychological warfare and praying for the destruction of the enemies. But there's also prayers that say, like, you know, our people is going to survive and thrive there's also like a verse like about where one of the prophets prophecies over the nation of Israel, saying that, like, these Israel is like dry bones, but the nation shall be like resurrected, And so that's sort of like that phrase in Ireland, Eir go Brach. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Erin go Brach.
Ireland forever, and so, or like Ireland never dies, or Ireland forever, or something, and so that's almost like you're speaking like a blessing over the country, that like it's almost like a magical act, saying like it's similar to like Vive la France, like or Viva Mexico. It's like or how like in Iran they chant like death to America. That's like a curse. So Aaron go right. That's like a blessing. That's saying like, and so if people say that enough, I think that like preserves like the culture and spirit of the land and stuff. Like so you can pray to bring life and pray to destroy. Like, and I don't know if it's ever spiritually appropriate to pray for curses or something like that. Like the Christians sort of rejected that. So maybe they have a point. I don't know, but it's in the Old Testament, so we got to think about it.
Well, okay, we're getting into very general talk here.
Totally.
Like, could we wrap up Genesis 1-3 and then we can talk about what the hell we like?
I thought we already wrapped it up.
Let's give a summary. Like, we've passed our opinions chapter and chapter, but how about the whole 3? Like, any closing thoughts, and then we can move on.
On the whole thing. God.
Speak up.
Can you not hear me properly?
Now we can.
My closing thought would be that God didn't really met out a full punishment to people. He gave mankind a chance to redeem themselves by not destroying them. He sent them out into a world. It wasn't the original world. It wasn't his world of Eden, but and he gave us a blessing. Like he said, like, this is your place to the man, this is your place to the woman, and this is your place to the serpent. And that's what's been basically continued on to Noah. But I think that chance at redemption is what we're still living through. I don't see it as punishment with a capital P, like a total death sentence. He obviously loved man enough and thought him capable enough to actually come back from it. And that generation, through Noah and his survival, is still with us today. He's our ancestor, if you wanted to say that. That's what I would love to touch upon. And we're still that image of God possessing that word, as it linked into what we were talking about just a little while ago. We're God's regent on the earth, and we must rule justly and righteously. That's what we're talking about.
I hear that. That softens my
I don't know,
position a little.
Sure, yeah, I mean, that's the way it's generally thought about by both the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. That, like, it wasn't a damnation that we faced. It was just going out into the world of new challenges. It's fallen, and it's fallen because now we have to deal with sin without the aid of God, like the immediate aid of God. But with the God, His will resides through us now. So it's not a complete cut-off from God. That's what I'm trying to get across. We still are in touch with God.
I hear that.
It's pretty just you're outside, aren't you, John?
Yeah, it's leaves. That's all. They're waving above my head. Like, it's kind of there's a. I don't want to change topics like just so dramatically, but there is a hurricane coming in, right? Isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Pretty good.
Storm Callum.
I'm actually in Kilkenny at the moment. I could hear it a lot earlier. It's kind of died down now though.
It's kind of going past like the north of us.
today in Western Ireland, Galway, was so warm. We were like 20 degrees up here.
I heard that, yeah.
Beautiful.
We got to only 15 though, over here.
Yeah, it was pretty warm.
What temperature was it in Kilkenny earlier?
I remember it was quite sunny at some point, but I can't remember the actual temperature. I'd say it was around 15 or 16.
Yeah. Very unseasonably warm, like, and I think it's meant to continue on next week sometime, is it? I think so. I know it is in England. I read that, and I'm not going to say where but yeah, I mean, is there any closing thoughts that you have on Genesis, or are you happy enough? Or what's the plan for next time, even?
Who are you
Or is there going to be any time? Yourself, Howard. As,
I'd love to continue this series. Like, can we go on another? Like, how many chapters are in Genesis?
I think there's about. I'm not too sure. 20 something, anyway.
Okay, so we can go from Genesis 3 to 6 next week. Yeah.
Are you sure? Do you want to increase that? Is that okay, or?
You know what? What was this? 2 hours? Yeah, about 2 hours. I think, yeah, 3 chapters per show is good. What do y'all think?
Hello.
Yeah, it seems pretty good amount.
A couple of months worth of shows, basically.
Yeah.
If you're doing it once a week. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
That's fair.
loving
What do you
this,
think, Patrick?
you know?
Is?
Yeah, I'm
What
cool
do
with
you
it.
think, Patrick?
I'm cool with it. It's soul food. It's soul food.
Yeah, I was just running it by Patrick because he suggested like 8 chapters or something at first when we first discussed this.
Holy shit.
That's what I was saying. Like, I'm not saying. I mean, you could do that, but you'd be doing it really, really fast. You'd be saying, "Well, there they got thrown out of the Garden of Eden," then move on to the next one. That kind of way.
It's a very dense text. I will give it that.
I hope you.
All cards on the table. You know, I'm not a Christian. You know, I find the Bible kind of tedious, but you know, when I listen to the conversation, the back and forth, I see the value in it. You know, so I can see how there's a lot to unpack. You know.
Yeah, I mean, if you did 8 chapters, you'd have to be very selective in which verses you focused on. But as far as like, so Howard, if I understand this correctly, I believe you're a pagan. I don't know what you are, Mike. If you're a pagan, agnostic or Christian or whatever.
As I said before, pagan Catholic.
Pagan Catholic.
I don't know. I'd probably like consider myself like a cultural Christian in the way I behave, but yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like I'm particularly religious.
Well, like the thing I would say to somebody who's not religious or whatever is that like a lot of this information here was taken, not all of it, but a lot of it was taken from pagan sources. Like you can find a lot of the Book of Proverbs found in Egypt. I mean, a lot of this is obviously based on Sumerian stuff. I mean, and so it's almost like if a pagan gets into the Bible, I think it's almost like them, reclaiming their own heritage in a sense, because it's contained within the Bible. And also, for somebody who's just not really religious at all, I mean, it's good from a purely sociological point of view.
Yeah.
Just understand like the history of like just playing with ideas too. I mean, even from playing with ideas.
What I really never understood is how, like, modern European pagans, whether they're New Age or kind of like the new conservative brand of pagans, like how they dislike the Bible in general, but especially the Old Testament. But when the Old Testament is the most mythological and the most similar to their paganism, and the New Testament is simply Greek philosophy, you know. So that's what I don't understand, like why pagans would dislike the Bible so much, and of course they'll say, well,
let you in on a secret, John. Well, it's not so much a secret. You already know this.
They haven't fucking read it.
Damn, there's always that. Well, like, there's one thing reading it. Like, I'll admit, when I was like a teenager, I used to read the Bible, and I was like, yeah, I kind of knew that already. But like, I never, as you said, unpacked it. I never understood there was an actual history behind it. And what I was reading, I was opening up pages randomly and completely and taking it out of context, even if I read a couple of chapters.
Nothing.
Of course, yeah. I mean, but even then, I thought it was, interesting, but can't really apply this and have a practical use for it. But I was young, like, but I didn't understand what I was really about. I didn't understand what the Bible was about.
That was kind of my tangent as well, really, and I think like it's kind of intensified when you kind of, as everybody in Ireland has had the experience of kind of going to like a church where it can be a bit dull or something like that. The services, and like it's too esoteric. And
when you start to understand the Bible, though, it really is actually interesting, and maybe you might call it riveting. But
I mean, that's honestly what I find, like what I've started to find, I guess, like as I got older or whatever. Just it's kind of read it of your own interest, kind of gets the ball rolling.
What I think we're experiencing, like especially me and Howard in Ireland, is because like there's a culture of Christianity in the United States still. Ours is kind of more like really in the background, and it's more embedded in with our Irish culture rather than Christian culture. Is it been a failure from not just the church but the generations before us to actually teach us this stuff? And that's because they didn't even know it themselves. And as Howard says, they didn't read it. They didn't read any of it. My parents just believed whatever they heard at mass, the sermon. I mean,
like,
homily right at the end.
There's no value in that, really. Like, it's just like, I don't know. That's what put me off it for like a long time as well. I think it deserves proper study, because like it can kind of like make you more aware of how you're living your life and in relation to it. And I don't know. Yeah, I suppose I would say I'm not religious, but that's probably only because I don't associate with any particular order or something like that. I never particularly enjoyed like services or anything like that, or never like fervently like went to them and stuff like that. So I suppose like in my mind, I would associate kind of religiousness with kind of belonging to a church, I suppose. And for me, that's not really been a thing.
I consider myself religious. I don't go to church as much as I should. I do want to start going more. One of the things that's interesting is there is Roman pagan DNA in the Catholic Church. There's like the holy water that you bless yourself with before going into the church. That's they had the same thing at Roman temples. It's called lustral water that they had outside the temples to people purify themselves before going in. And there's like other rituals in the church are related to like Roman stuff. And there's also it's all sorts of like Irish folklore hidden in the stories of the saints. Like there was some story about a famous Irish chief whose daughter became a saint or something. I forget it. I'll have to look at it. But there's it's not only Roman pagan DNA, but it contains a lot of like the cultural DNA of wherever it went. And so then it collected like cultural DNA of Ireland, of Mexico, all sorts of places. And so there's like indigenous Mexican customs in the Mexican Catholicism. And so there really isn't. Well, there's that, but there's also like Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so there was never, like with the Catholic Church, there was never really like a hard divide between paganism and Christianity. Like the persecution of paganism wasn't really the persecution of paganism. It was a persecution of overt paganism in the history of the church. But if you kind of like pretended that your paganism was Christian, they sort of let the church assimilate it, basically.
it's a good way of describing it. Like, I mean, particularly the stories of the Irish saints. What's her name? Like Saint, I can't pronounce this. Gobnait, Gob, or I don't know how you pronounce that. But like she, before she became a saint of Christianity, I think before she became a Christian at all, she was a pagan. An angel came to her, one of the chief angels, and told her to find her resting place, like to find her soul where she rested in God. And she was famous for like bees and beekeeping and all of that sort of stuff. And in Ireland and most of the rest of Europe, actually not Western Europe, like that, the bee became a symbol of the soul. So that's how it entered, and that was kind of pre-Christian, if you know what I mean. So you have this patron saint of bees and beekeepers, which is her, which is from the Irish tradition, and now she's incorporated in as a saint into the Irish church, particularly.
That's an interesting thing that I want to pick apart. Like, is there any metaphysical correlations between the bee and the soul? Yeah, I mean, in Irish mythology, the soul or the essence of the person, the part of the body in the form of a bee or a butterfly, and a child's in the form of a white butterfly. And it transferred like to the other world through the ether and into the realm of the gods across the sea. So like, and that's what hits on Genesis too, because like in the Irish cosmology, like we're surrounded by a sea, and to get to the other world you have to go through the ocean, which is guarded by Manan MacLear, who is he's technically the god of the other world. Sometimes he's called the god of the sea as well, or one of his children, his daughter, like Niamh, brought Oisin to the other world. Like, you have to go through him first, and he rides a horse that runs on water, and all of this sort of stuff. The water being of prime interest, because like the other world exists because there's 5 streams there that feed it, that give it its fertility. So like the soul goes over that as in the form of a butterfly or a bee. So when we're talking about animals that have meaning, I'd like to put this out there, to the non-Christian, the kind of Christian, and the Christian. Over the last few months, I have developed a relationship with houseflies. Those annoying guys that just...
I can actually relate to this, so keep going.
Well, I've gotten to the point where I could open up a window and say, "Hey, guy, get the fuck out of my house." And they'd fly over to the window and then out the window. And depending on like how at peace with myself I am, the stronger my connection with these creatures. Like, at the worst of times, I'd spend hours trying to get a housefly out of my room and out the window. But when I'm really locked in... What's that you said?
I just remember being really idiotic and just like banging up against the window.
Yeah, come on, just a little more left, come on.
A stonefly actually flew into the person's phone last night, and it was hideous. It just kept on banging up against everything, and actually just stopped trying to get it out the window. I just went to a different room. So it just started bothering me. I left the door slightly ajar and was reading for a bit, and 5 minutes later it just comes in the fucking door. Yeah.
So the whole thing about flies, right? Supposedly they're Satan, like if you have flies around you, then you're satanic. Like they leveled that against Obama.
The ambassador of Satan, like the Antichrist?
I think it flies through onto his face at some point. I think it flies through onto Hillary Clinton's face at some point.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton as well.
That's a very Roman way of looking at things.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's like probably to do with corruption, because isn't there some kind of like doctrine, I don't know if you call it a doctrine, but like, you know, like incorruptibility in the church, in the Catholic Church, they see it as a sign of like, you know, when like a person's body doesn't like decay, they kind of see it as a sign of holiness. Like, I was kind of looking at the saints recently, because I actually visited my grandfather recently, and he has like a portrait of like I think Saint of Lords or something like that. But they all have this kind of same like beatific like kind of like look in their eyes, on their face, and that kind of seems to like exist across cultures. But yeah, like incorruptibility, I think one of those saints, their body like somehow didn't decay, and I think it's still on display somewhere. But maybe its lies have something to do with this like corruptibility or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually like it comes up in Dostoevsky's books as well. I think this idea of like incorruptibility. That's how I came to get to know it.
Yeah, I think so. Like decay, like yeah.
Some of those saints' bodies, like it goes beyond like eternal petrification. It goes into like these mana seeps out of them, like this substance that like the priest collects from the body or from a particular part of the body or an object that they have, and like you can look up what mana is, and they refuse to get it tested by science and all this, but I thought it would just be interesting purely to see the material physics of it. It wouldn't kind of, if they found out it was just something normal and natural, it still wouldn't put me off the idea that this was from the saint themselves. Like the natural is just the same thing as the supernatural to me in a certain way.
It's just unmeasured by science, that's all.
Well, science is just fixated on a certain type of physics and don't want to know about other types. That's how I see it as. And as I said, I think, what did I say to you, Patrick, the other day? Like what is the chemical composition for like a good Shakespeare play? I mean, they haven't found that out yet. I mean, technically, you should be able to find out what a Shakespeare play is made of, like, or what it takes to make it. And it may sound silly, but according to science, you should be able to find out. So
I think Shakespeare is a genius. Like, he's probably one of the smartest people ever in like the history of the world in terms of like his plays and like the ideas he expressed. His like what his brain was capable of. I don't have really seen in the world the way he thinks. Like, it's amazing.
Likelihood he didn't exist and he was a panel of intellectuals.
Regardless, like whether it's one person, a bunch of people, Shakespeare, somebody else, I have not seen the same level recently.
No one has.
I just want to read something about Saint Dymphna. Are you familiar with Saint Dymphna?
No.
That's a patron saint of mental health or something like that, or good health, good mental health.
Do you know about the story of her?
No.
Okay, so her father was pagan and her mother was Christian. So when she was 14 years old, she consecrated herself to Christ. But then shortly thereafter, her mother died. So her father, Damon, loved his wife deeply and was very sad. And so then he vowed that he would only marry somebody as beautiful as his wife. And then he realized that it was his daughter who was as beautiful as his wife. But then his daughter, Dymphna, didn't want to marry him. And so she left and she hung out in Europe. And then her father eventually found her. And there was some sort of scuffle. And then her father chopped off her head.
Oh my god.
And so that's Saint Dymphna.
Right there.
Wow.
But I think
it reminds me of like Irish mythology, like all the wooing tales, where like a king might end up selecting his daughter or marrying his daughter by mistake, or sometimes on purpose. So this is like continuing on from Irish mythology for me, like, and she was an early saint as well, wasn't she? Like early centuries in Ireland Christianity.
Yeah, and so this is just an example about like the Catholic Church ended up being a carrier of local folklore and just sort of assimilating like the pagan DNA of the nation. So like Celtic Christianity has pre-Christian Irish DNA in it through like the folklore of the Saints. It contains some of the stuff from the culture, and I think this is like a horrible story, but there's also something kind of beautiful about it, and horribly beautiful at the same, horrible and beautiful at the same time. And I also found that the idea of the beautiful aspect I think about it is just like the irrationality of the passion. You know, I mean, it's horrible because it's like perverse and sick and twisted too. And so it's like it's a combination of things. And I found the whole idea about the soul being a butterfly, which is beautiful too. But
yeah, I mean, Ireland probably could be described as a place of terrible beauty. Yeah, in terms of everything really.
Terrible. That's what J.R.R. Tolkien said about it. He said he regarded Ireland as naturally evil. Because he saw it as inhabited by like the forces that was contained in Irish mythology, which were like really glamorous and weird and like nonsensical, like that tale. That's why he perceived it. Whereas in the old English tales, it's completely different. Like it's totally sober and somber, and it has a moral ending to the story. And it's like the fairy tales that Disney comes out. You know, that's old English style of mythology and folklore. But Ireland is completely different. It's very anything can happen in the story, and it can just continue on in a very weird and wonderful way. That makes sense if you really analyze it, but not at face value. It hardly makes any sense at all. But like Tolkien said as well, that like the only thing keeping Ireland in check, like this evil that inhabited the land and the peat and the bogs, was like the Catholic religion. And like I would say he didn't understand how embedded Catholicism was into those myths that he said it kept at bay, because it was inhabited by the myths too. So I don't think he understood Ireland. Because
well, in his defense, okay, I'd like to quote the comedian Dylan Moran, and this is a callback to my show, The Anti-Broadcast, earlier today. He was performing in Australia, and Australia have the habit of putting horrible health notices all over their packets of cigarettes, like today in Ireland, but much worse. And he asked the question, what's the point in putting a perfectly Irish smile on a pack of cigarettes?
Yeah, good point.
I see what he's getting at. But I also think that's kind of self. I know he's a comedian, but like kind of devaluing ourselves or the Irish like that, it's just not good, because it's actually embedding. It's causing us to keep carrying the famine along with us, as John Waters would say. Like we'll not be able to shake it off. We'll just keep the head down low, keep the head down, and keep walking really small, shrink yourself down. You know, Irish teeth and all, Irish smiles and all this. I think that's what the net result of it is. It's not actually a good thing.
Yeah, you're just propagating the seed, the destructive seed of maybe somebody else's characterization.
It's like
perhaps. I think people are pretty quite aware of that now, and even if they can't really articulate it or something like that. You know?
It's like you're actually exposing your genetics to extreme harm by saying, first of all, they're not aesthetically pleasing, and second of all, that there's nothing you can do about it because it's genetic, because this is the Irish thing, and it causes people culturally to act different in their lives and socially in a way that actually undermines them. Because they start to disavow everything that's Irish, and they start to say, "Oh, that's very Irish, isn't it?" And it'd be something very negative, and you're placing on yourself and on others and on me. And when I defend myself, they're kind of thinking like, "Why is this guy defending himself?" Doesn't he know
there's
this
a
is
lot
what
of
to
it.
say?
Yeah.
Well, it's a curse. It's a curse they're putting upon themselves and others.
And they think it's strange when you defend yourself because they expect you to know what they're talking about, and you do, but you're rejecting it. And they think there's a problem when you reject it, not because they took offense to it or anything, but because you're not playing ball as such, and therefore you don't get to like.
Yeah.
They try to pass it off as a joke or whatever. Even if you are joking about it, I'm not talking about when you defend yourself. Like, not talking about 100% like lethal or serious. But even if you defend yourself in a jokingly sort of way, it has the same effect. I think it's very pointless against other people.
Well, there's a Russian proverb that says, "In every joke, there is a bit of joke." I don't know.
Yeah. You'd have to think about that one, but I think we get initially
Like
something else.
You get what I mean from the proverb? In every joke, there's a bit of a joke.
Yeah, because
I like this in the. I think so, but I'm not sure.
It's basically saying most of the joke is true, and there's only a bit of a joke in it.
All right.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's another proverb from my deck of cards.
Yeah. I think to kind of in a friendly manner or to kind of jokingly kind of negate someone's like deprecation of your shared culture or whatever. That's probably the best way to handle it.
Certainly in our neck of the woods, it's probably the best way to handle it.
It seems like a particularly tactful way of handling it.
It's because they're culturally as well. Like, if you never notice, like, fathers rarely, or I don't know, it could be different with your family or whatever. But I'm not saying in my family. My father was a pretty serious man, so he taught me to be able to discuss things frankly and reason, and to actually be able to talk to particularly other guys, other men that way, and that was okay. But most men don't learn that. Most fathers don't pass on that mode of thinking and mode of conversing onto their sons. So therefore, I approached them in a frank manner in Ireland. They never learned that from their father. Maybe there's something wrong with that because they never seen it before. They've never seen something like that in operation.
Yeah, actually, it's probably something I never really thought about. Yeah.
It's strange to me hearing sort of like a negative self-image people might have in Ireland, because in the United States, most of the Irish Americans here tend to have leadership roles, and mostly like a dominant position. I mean, I kind of get the impression that people I don't know. I mean, I think there's like a flaw in a self-image in Ireland, because in America it's totally different. It's almost like the opposite.
Yeah, I suppose some American people probably hold Irish or Ireland in kind of high regard or something like that.
The Irish American population has a lot of influence in our country, and almost like a position of social dominance. If you look at get the most of our political commentators are about half of them are Irish. Look at their last names.
Their last names. Yeah, you do notice it. Yeah.
The Irish, or if you want to call them Irish, they're very influential population here, and so the self-deprecation in Ireland seems kind of strange, considering that when unleashed upon other ethnic groups, they ended up rising very high in the ranks over here in America. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Go back to just what you were saying about frankness as well, and things like that, or just I don't know, maybe being straightforward, or just being also kind of converse with people in a kind of tempered manner, I guess, as opposed to kind of shutting down when they say things you don't like and stuff.
Isn't it kind of what I would call it is kind of like Japanese in a certain way? In order to talk about something serious, you need to say something else that's in the background about that item of conversation.
Yeah.
So like you never can broach it fully and like in a just concise manner. I'm not talking about even like the Germans or the Dutch, like we're just so frank. I don't even like it. But I mean, just like say more like I don't know. The Scottish even are more able to do it than we are. Like, and the Northern Irish are. They're able to just say what needs to be said without being rude. Well, down here, it's just this position of defensive you're always encountering because I think you're bringing up subjects that maybe they feel bad about because they don't know. Not that they don't know anything about it. It's just that they know you're correct and they would rather not reopen the wound or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing in Northern Ireland, now that you mention it. Everyone has a name. Like, you know, a name. Everyone takes the piss. And everyone says, oh, there goes Romeo again. You know, that kind of thing. So everyone's, like, on some level aware of what people think of them because they have this kind of nickname, and on a daily basis everyone's referring to them as this nickname in a kind of a joking manner, and the culture is that, you know, this isn't really what people think. This is, well, okay, they think this about you, but, you know, they love you. That kind of thing.
Well, the joke part of it is just to shield, is just to keep it perpetuated. You know what I mean? So like it's like there's the joke aspect of it is like a mask to prevent it from being like undone. You know what I mean? It looks like it's just like a pecking order thing. It's just like a pecking order.
See, you're just showing a caricature of the person so that you at times can raise that instead of dealing with the real person. And sometimes that's a good thing. That's why I'm bringing it up. Like sometimes it's better to deal with the character of a person rather than the person themselves to tell them something. But I think in Ireland, in Southern Ireland, I know some listeners probably won't like me calling that now, but like in the Republic of Ireland, but like we always deal with the character alone, almost like through the form of slagging. That's what slagging does. It's a way of, especially in the pub, slagging where you're bringing out emotions and ideas and concepts you wouldn't normally bring out if you didn't have this mechanism to use. So I think I like slagging. I used to like it a lot. But as I've grown older, I've actually got involved in it much less because I've seen the damage it's done to people, and particularly the people like close to me that slagging has done to them. Like they've been told throughout their lives that they were stupid, and like say this girl I know, like a dumb blonde and all that kind of stuff. And they took that to heart, and they left the country. And then when they left the country, they ended up like this particular girl, like she ended up working for the Department of Education in a senior position, writing the curriculum in New Zealand. You know, and she was a stupid, dumb blonde. You see, and the problem in Ireland is that the slagging is they usually slag your strongest feature, your strongest traits. So the smart person is called stupid, and the attractive person is just a dumb blonde. So, and that's what happened to that particular girl, and she never really wants to come back. As far when I was talking to her last, because of the damage that was.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of malevolent, and other times it's kind of like more obviously just like joking, you know, and kind of like like good-heartedly kind of taking the piss out of someone. If they can give it back, you know, that's even better, and like maybe you can even get a laugh out of it or something.
There's two sides to it, all right. And there's some fun to be had there, like a genuine kind of amusement and bonding for certain. But I think there is an underbelly of it, and it gives a certain type of character an ability to actually strike out at people, and they have no defense against it, especially if he or she is good at slagging.
There's actually a dark side where like person doesn't know the social mechanism or isn't familiar with it, then
I would just call it like slagging as a narcissistic art. That's what they use it as. And actually can shred people to smithereens. I seen it happen a good few times, like with just different people. And especially the people with the more obvious problems, like say, I don't know, they're overweight or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
They struggle with money or something, or you know, it can be a huge issue if it comes to slagging.
Well, I think I think this issue can be particularly difficult if because the way in which people are taught to deal with emotional problems these days is they're primarily led to like a chemical route, and so like I think in the past, if somebody was slagged, they might just deal with it through psychological means or something like that. Whereas if people become dependent on some of these drugs they're selling people, I mean, I have heard multiple like results of this. Like some people have said that they took a certain like drug for like, you know, a couple months, and then afterwards they said they were okay from it. Whereas other people I know, they took it and then they just became like really more screwed up, and then it led to something worse, you know. And so I think that where people are like, so somebody like gets like emotionally like messed up from the slagging, and then they get caught up in the mental health system, then that could just be them getting picked away at even more by various things. I think there's a possibility of that. I mean, it can go either way. I mean, some people say it helps them, but that's been the minority. So, like, I know a girl whose brain is like mentally retarded from all the medication they gave her, and she used to be really smart.
Maybe it's better. I would
say that the people who gain some kind of benefit from these drugs have actually experienced the placebo effect. You know, just this slight alteration in how they experience the world just kind of set them off on a roll, you know? It made them think, oh my god, you know, shit's changing for the best. And since they were in that mindset of shit changing for the best, well, it changed for the best.
Well, it's never been more than like a month or 2 months of people taking it, and then afterwards they stopped. And those are the only ones who I've heard having something good from it. Like, none of the people who've taken them long term, it just seems like they've screwed them up.
But I mean, like, if someone is causing you anxiety, they're like, by like kind of malevolent, you know, like flagging you like terribly or something. Like, maybe it's better to just confront them, you know, even if there's like a danger of getting hurt or something like that, or you know, nothing changing at all. But maybe that's what used to be more common, you know.
It was probably
all this
insulation.
Say again?
I say as well, it's like probably being insulated by your tribe, by your family, that you wouldn't actually take the slagging as serious because you had people close to you that could mirror your actual self and actually care about you.
Like like you know that they know who you really are, or like have more of an idea about the totality of your being than the people making a caricature of yourself. That's why it's really important, for like to have strong family.
You know, I had an experience where I think maybe it was Christmas or Easter, you know, one of those points in the year where a family gets together. I forget, but like, you know, my cousins, my, you know, uncles and aunts, and, you know, the whole lot were there. And I was a teen at the time, and it was just piss take after piss take after piss take, and it ruined me. Like, I literally, like, hated my family for maybe 2 months. But, you know, because that's as far as my memory went, you know. But, like, nobody was in my vicinity to tell me, hey, you know, this is just how people are, you know. Like, even though I was within my family. Like, maybe it would be different, like, 200 years ago. But, you know, 20 fucking 5, you know, I don't know.
I guess I'm kind of talking about like an ideal version of what what the family should be, but yeah, if
Right.
it's kind of within the family and they're not kind of reflecting your full like
Well,
potentiality or whatever, your full potential, like then yeah,
I think
I
families
can
have
see all
changed.
sides of that.
Like I think families have changed from the way Mike is talking about, in the sense that everyone now has economic independence. So there's not
Yeah.
as much pressure to stick together for the good of your values, because it seems people are oblivious to that if you don't stick together and look out for your family, that your values aren't actually going to procreate and survive into the future. I'm not even talking about procreation of biologically. I talk just your values. If the son doesn't like the father or the mother, or the daughter her mother, it's very unlikely they're going to take up their values until, if they do, it'll be later in life, like in their 30s or 40s.
Like the traditions you're saying, like
Yeah, I mean, just the traditions themselves. Like if the father or mother is religious, or in the sense that like they believe in a higher power and as a good thing, like they will be less likely to take that on if they don't have a good relationship.
that's why I wonder. That's why I wonder if like the situation in the West with a lot of people losing connection with like the past and embracing like hyper modernism. I wonder if that's just like a reflection of widespread family dysfunction, maybe not extreme family dysfunction, but widespread family dysfunction on some level, because like that's the only explanation I could come up with for why some of these traditions aren't being passed on.
It's a good way. I mean, because what I said earlier about, like, say, our relationship with Catholicism in Ireland, and that our parents didn't pass it on to us. It's the same thing with Irish mythology. Exact same thing. It's the same thing with family history. It's the same thing with like we're taught, as I was taught to go to school, do well, go to college, get a good job, and then get a mortgage, and that was life. But I was never told to defend my values, or that my values may be under attack. They were important. And what are my values? I wasn't informed about any of this, and it was kind of just expected that I would just take it up what my parents believed in. And that I can't say it did or didn't happen, but I know with other people of my generation, a lot of it didn't happen. Like they did everything that their parents told them. Technically, our generation, the millennials, we did everything right. We went to the colleges, we got good marks, we got jobs from those courses we did, and now we're stuck. We're stuck and beset on all sides, and it's kind of like entertainment and chemicals are used as a way out, like just to make us oblivious that we have now been a dispossessed class in our own society, especially men. And we have no real say, we have no representation in the institutions that govern us. So I was saying, I would say Patrick is correct in that this all starts off with the family, in the way that the man must assert his interests and the son must be shown how to do that, like as a rite of passage. Because traditionally, like the rite of passage was like the confirmation, let's say, and that's when in a traditional European society, the boy would go and join his father in the job, like in his job, and learn the tools of the trade and the craft. We don't have that anymore. You're allowed to kind of perpetuate childhood till, I think it's in common culture, like until you're 30, then you have to get your act together. And it's a big difference between age 30 and 12 or 13. So I think it's the same idea with like having frank, reasoned conversation that's somehow seen as wrong in Ireland. It just hasn't been passed on as a skill. An inherited skill from the family.
Yeah, even like personality traits like that, that can small kind of like skills I guess like that could lead you towards a more kind of structured or ordered life. I mean they come from the father, like there's no doubt about it if you're a guy anyway.
Can I hop in here? We need to wrap this up, and myself and Patrick, we gotta get going here. Maybe John and Mike, y'all can have a private conversation, continue with this privately.
I actually I probably have to go as well because I'm up pretty early.
I should get going now, but I just want to say before I go that, I think it's important for people to love themselves and love their family and stuff. And I do think that there's a redemptive power in love, and that we can all be redeemed, and our families can be redeemed, and our relationships with our families can be redeemed. So if there's anything going on there. So
I second that motion.
It's a good point to finish off on, for certain.
Yeah.
And are we continuing this like next week? Is that your plan, Howard?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Next Wednesday? Okay.
Same time next week.
Everyone, I suppose, and bring your thoughts with you and your notebook.
3 through 6.
3 through 6, yeah.
3 to 6. I just hopped in today, so I'll actually read ahead.
4 past 6.
Are you going to join us next week, Mike?
Yeah, I will. I should be able to. I don't see why not. I just kind of